Test, test. Hello, hello. Like it's coming through okay. Welcome, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for stopping by the stream. Hope you're having a good weekend. Thank you for both being patient with the lack of the Thursday stream. I got a Switch so that I can check out Breath of the Wild and kind of revisit it. But unfortunately, I had some difficulty setting up my capture card and everything, just like getting used to the new setup. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't rush it and that I uh, got familiar with that before diving in. So apologies for the delay there, but I'm definitely going to be ready to do that on Thursday, barring any like uh, massive explosions in my place of residence, which, knock on wood, that that won't be relevant. Um, but yeah, it should be fun to dive into that. Thanks for your patience with that. I'm also trying to start a little bit later with the Naruto streams because I've noticed, based on like when people show up, it seems to be the case that more people are around from 7 to 9, 7 to 10 ish. And basically, I'm usually free most of the day on Sunday anyway. So I want to keep up with a reasonably regular schedule, but I'm more than happy to kind of shift it around based on when people are around. I used to do it around 2 p.m. because we had some viewers who were in Europe and it was a better time for them. So, maybe I'll post a poll and see how people are feeling about the time slots and stuff like that. Either way, very happy to see you guys here. Welcome, Saria. Welcome, Dr. Strangle. Shinigami. Oh, yeah, Shinigami. I saw you subscribe recently. I wanted to say thank you very much for checking out the streams and for the subscription as well. It's cool to see you here. I see you're saying that you're new here and decided to drop by since you'd heard John mention Abstract. Yeah, I've been on a couple of Abstract streams. I think I've sent a couple, hopefully not overly edgy messages. But I really do appreciate the fact that, like, in any of the streams that I've seen of Abstract sections, he's always like pretty like what's the word I'm looking for? Just like friendly and upbeat and engaging in the way that he discusses topics. And he and I have disagreed on certain things, but when we do, we usually wind up having a bit of a back and forth that I wind up either feeling like I'm learning something or feeling like I have an incentive to go do more research without feeling like insulted or downcast or anything like that. Like I think he's really good about encouraging discussion back and forth and like getting people excited about a given topic. So yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it's a rarity in the community. I think of the Naruto YouTubers that I've come across recently, Sybil, Abstract, and I was gonna say Lilos. I don't know if Lilos really does that much Naruto stuff these days, but like I really appreciated when he had the Lightspeed Naruto debate, or I think Universal debate or something like that. Like he basically just hosted a debate for multiple people where he's like, "Hey, I just want people to come and share their thoughts, make their arguments, and have an open discussion about this." And he was more sort of curating the conversation and just trying to learn. Um, and that's great. I think that that's genuinely wonderful. And though you'll probably have noticed already, and if you haven't, I'm sure you will pick up on this soon, that I tend to disagree pretty strongly with Sage of Thick Calves. And part of the reason why is like that kind of ties into my overall preference for like curiosity and let's just say like proactive investigation done as a group as opposed to like taking a hard line stance and consolidating information. That probably sounded weird, but it will hopefully make more sense once we get into tonight's discussion. But thank you so much for checking out the streams. I really do appreciate it, and it's good to see you again. Very nice. I think I see Shinigami referring to you as Ursa. I think that's how how we first bumped into each other was on one of Abstract streams, and he was calling you Ursa, if I remember correctly. So, I mean that's something I really like about this community is that like it's a relatively small community, and then people wind up kind of having these Venn diagram circles of overlap, which is kind of cool. So you see familiar faces from time to time. Saria and I actually bumped into each other first in one of Sage's streams, and then in his server. So credit where credit is due. That like even though I might disagree with certain people's perspectives on things, they're really good. Sometimes they will still be good at bringing other people together. Yeah, that's what I meant to say, actually. I lost my train of thought, but like probably my favorite piece of content, so to speak, that Sage has done is when he hosts debate tournaments and he invites people to participate. Setting aside the recent mortified guest appearance, I guess you could say, a variety of the other stuff that he's like the attorneys that he's had, the people that he's had on. It's all been pretty respectful. It's all been pretty, like uh, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Not amenable, but like affable. Affable is the word I've been looking for. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of cool to see people coming together and sharing stuff and collaborating. That's what I tend to prefer more so than the competition. I do enjoy a good competitive debate from time to time, but yeah, I really like seeing the meeting of the minds, if that makes sense. Yeah, Dr. Strangle, hope you're doing well. Let's see. Oh, Saria says here slightly late because I was locked in on Hyrule Warriors. Oh, that's no problem. We got the daylight savings stuff. I don't know who here is affected by that, but that like we quote unquote lost an hour today, right? So I'm sure if you guys are anything like me, you might have taken a minute to recalibrate from that. Um, so yeah, Hyrule Warriors. I have been like putting off getting into it because I know the moment that I start, um, I'm gonna get addicted in all likelihood. But I have Age of Imprisonment loaded on my Switch, so I'm like, I am gonna wind up getting sucked in pretty soon, I'm sure. Shinigami says, "Well, he does make me feel encouraged to draw more, especially storyboards." Hey, that's awesome, man. I I haven't seen your work, but I would encourage you to keep up with it regardless. Like, especially in a burgeoning age of AI taking over everything, we need people making cool art and continuing to invest in their own creative efforts. So yeah, consider yourself encouraged from from me as well. I hope that that continues to go well for you. I'd be curious to hear more about it if you want to share like what kinds of media you draw storyboards for or whatnot. Shinigami says, I saw your Lightspeed streams and you were pretty against Sage's methods in a sense. Yeah, so here's the thing. I kind of I was really um what's the word for it? Not exactly inspired, but almost relieved when I first came across Sage's channel because I was coming off of a wave of like dealing with folks like Noodles, um, and I had been sort of involved in that side of the community, so to speak, and really getting kind of jaded and kind of cynical about, you know, this particular approach to, let's just say, competitive Naruto power scaling, where there was a bit of hostility involved. It was very adversarial. When I came across Sage's stuff, the first video of his that I saw was the Naruto canon explained, and I was like, oh, awesome. This is so refreshing. Here is somebody who not only genuinely understands what he's talking about, but is presenting the information in a way that is like sharing data openly and freely and positively encouraging people to then have like this evidentiary grounding or grounding of understanding that they can then use to do their own research. Something that I felt was really lacking in the community, something that I really appreciated. And for what it's worth, I do still think that some of Sage's videos hold that standard. Oh, sorry, I should turn off that bot message that no longer applies. 1 second. Yeah, that was for the previous stream. Tonight it's going to be more of a chill, open discussion. So let me see if I can remove that action. 1 sec. Yes. Okay, so that should take care of that. Sorry about that. But yeah, so I think that was what I was kind of inspired by. But then, like, without getting into all the details, unless you really want me to, we had a couple of disagreements about Lightspeed in Naruto, Universal Naruto, Naruto geography, stuff like that. And I found that when I tried to engage with him, um, there was something that I consider, like, I guess I would call like an anti-skeptical approach, where that is kind of shared by the debate side of the community, the competitive side of the community, so to speak, where like there seems to be this focus on trying to figure out like how to clear a point or how to win an argument as opposed to genuinely understanding the source material. And I frankly don't really care about, like, I'm not a good debater. I don't think I can win debates even if I have perfect knowledge, which I don't. Um, but like it's just a skill set that I haven't really cultivated. I'd like to think that if I have a conversation with somebody I disagree about, that like we can resolve our differences. But in terms of like the aggressive, like proactive competition side of a debate, it's not a skill that I've really invested in. I don't really intend to. Um, so I guess I was just kind of like not particularly impressed by that, and so I went back and watched a bunch of his videos, and over time I kind of came to the conclusion that there's more of the competitive point clearing than there is genuine understanding and encouraging of understanding. And it does kind of feel sometimes like there's this approach among certain members of the community of like, I'm the guy who knows the things. Your job is to sit down, shut up, and listen. Don't make me repeat myself. Don't try to act like you know more than me because I'm the one who knows and you aren't. And this kind of came to a head on, or this was kind of like, that resonated on Sage's recent live stream where he was like doing his tier list update, and like some people were pushing back on his Hashirama and Minato points, and he said something along the lines of like, when are you people going to learn that Sage knows better than you? Sage understands this stuff more than you do. You guys need to understand that. You need to learn that Sage knows and you don't. And I was like, okay, I had some reservations about like focusing so much on this one person's channel and their content. And I was thinking maybe I should like kind of step off of that for a while. But no, I think as long as there are people in the community who I feel are putting out misinformation, and especially doing so in a way that's adversarial and discouraging to other people, like there is a gap between us. I understand things you do not. I'm the knower, you are not. Like, as long as that happens, I'm going to try to do what I can to at least offer counterpoints. I'm not going to dictate that people need to listen to me or need to not listen to X, Y, or Z person, but like, I want to try to at least participate in that conversation because it's really, really frustrating to see that shit keep happening. Hence, us talking about Hashirama this evening. But let me stop rambling for a second and get back to chat. Shinigami says, just drawing for your manga. Oh, that's fucking cool, man. That's awesome. Thinking about making an intelligence video. Oh, like intelligence for Naruto characters or intelligence in general in the broader psychological sense. Either way, that sounds really cool. Yeah, I'd be happy to learn more about that. Hey, Spitfire, welcome back. Thank you so much for stopping by. Hope you are doing well as well. I like your little logo there. I hadn't noticed that last time. Is that one of the frogs from Miyaboku with the goggles around his neck? It's a little small, so I can't quite make it out, but it looks like that. It's really cool. Shinigami says, I listen to Sage's videos sometimes, but not a fan of the hard stance he takes. Might be my ego. Oh, sorry, let me not jump ahead. Yeah, like, I want to be clear that I have listened to Sage's content a lot, and some of the stuff he has put out I have appreciated. Some of it has been more of a mixed bag, and others I have found, let's just say, a useful catalyst for learning, but I really don't like the rhetoric at play. And really, it's not that I have an objection to Sage as a person or as a content creator overall. It's just that over the past year or two that I've been like talking about Naruto online, I have noticed some trends in the way that people talk about Naruto that I feel leads to misunderstanding and misinformation. Sage is just like, for better for worse, a really useful example of some of those problems, right? Like, if you understand some of the mistakes that I feel he makes in some of his videos, you can apply that understanding to healthy skepticism towards other videos, other like calcs or whatever in general. And the same way that, like, you know, I think understanding some of the anti-skeptical rhetoric that you might hear out of Noodles or Seth or folks like that might help you be more aware of some of the like belligerent language that you're going to come into contact with, and learn how to kind of not let that discourage you and not let that like shut down a conversation. I think Sage is not the only one who uses this style of argumentation. You know, Key is another good example of somebody who, I think Key is much more like aggressive with it than Sage is, but still, it's like, generally speaking, when I have disagreements with people on Naruto topics, it's because of the same core misunderstandings from my perception. Not always the case. Like Virtue and Six and TG, for example, like I haven't always agreed with their stuff, but like if you take a look at TG's recent-ish video on Lightspeed and Naruto, he more kind of like presents an overall overview of the topic. And he seems to me to like agree with some points and disagree with some other points. Like Six in his Lightspeed Naruto video did something similar where he's like, I am summarizing all of the things for you. Here is the data. Some of these things I agree with, some of these I don't. And then it's more of like a, well, here's a data dump and you can kind of do with it what you want. And even if I don't wind up agreeing with their ultimate conclusions, you'll not notice me like objecting as much to TG or Six's stuff, because I'll be like, okay, like they're just kind of sharing their thoughts and leaving it open for discussion, right? It's a little less definitive. I think the biggest amount of shit I ever gave TG over was like, which I should probably like backtrack a little, I suppose, but like I was one of his thumbnails, he just said something like, you know nothing about this character, and I was like, well, maybe I know something. Why are you being so mean? But like it wasn't you know, I obviously like took it more personally than it was intended, so it was kind of tongue in cheek. Um, so yeah. So Shinigami says my Discord if you want to know about the character Shinigami 2002. Yeah, I'd be happy to add you. Let me send you a friend request right now before I forget. Um, just a heads up, and I'll probably mention this um again like quite a bit on stream, but like I only check Discord once every day or two because I have a tendency to get super wrapped up in conversations and stuff and let it consume my life. So if I'm slow to respond, please don't take it personally. Feel free to like, if you're ever trying to get in touch with me, feel free to send me a reminder message just in case I was like head in the clouds and didn't get back to you in a timely manner. Um, Shinigami says might be your ego, but not worried about AI. But thanks a lot. Yeah, no worries. I certainly hope that my concern about it is like unfounded. Um, it does seem like a lot of people are banding together to put into place protections that will help preserve jobs and preserve creativity. And to be fair, like just to, to be fair, I don't think AI is like universally bad or anything. The little bird icon that you see in my stream, at least I think it's up. Let me double check. Yeah, the in the upper right hand corner, that is AI generated. I'm working with an artist because I want to get a bespoke, custom piece of art made for it. But I've used AI in my channel, and also this channel over here is all AI generated stuff. I fucking love this guy. If you haven't seen stuff like Unanswered Oddities, The Tooth Booth, TikTok, like all the characters that this person creates or this team maybe creates are made with AI tools, but they're extremely creative and really entertaining and engaging. So like AI, just like any other bit of software, is a tool. Like you probably already know this, but like back in the day they used to edit film by splicing and cutting with razor blades and then like sticking back together with adhesive the tape and in order to like actually make footage like foot long lengths of film that would then get put on reels. And nowadays you can just open up like I don't know CapCut and make any number of arbitrary like cuts and welds and move shit around. It's like obviously much more fluid and easy, but that didn't ruin filmmaking by any means, right? So I don't think AI is going to take over the world or anything like that, but it is going to change things, just like the internet changed things, and we'll see how that affects everybody, hopefully for the better. Very nice says, I'm trying to get your understanding of the stat scaling for Naruto, John. My Discord is um, Uriel Narusa. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah, I'll add you gladly. 1 second. I'd rather do it now so I don't wind up forgetting because I can get a little scatterbrained. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I'm sorry, could you clarify the question? I want to make sure that I understand what you're asking. The stat scaling for Naruto, are you asking about like in the data books, when characters have um, different stat spreads, like strength 2, speed 5, like how that's calibrated and how that relates between characters, or how Naruto himself scales, or like be curious to hear more. Um, let's see. Shinigami says in general for many characters. Oh, okay, gotcha, cool. Yeah, world building is so fascinating to me. Like I've bumped into folks who have made their own like manga and like novels and stuff, and it's just like genuinely really impressive to me. That it's part of the reason why I love talking about Naruto so much. Is just whatever misgivings we might have as a community with some of the world building and pacing. Like you can't deny, in my opinion, that Kishimoto has created a very rich and detailed and vivid world that has resonated with a lot of people. And everything from light and shadow to character silhouettes to um glances to like fight choreography to framing, every aspect of the manga contributes to that storytelling. And the more time I have spent talking about it, I'm starting to notice more things, like even just the composition of panels, for example, that the framing, the amount of space that is given any given character on any given time, like it all contributes very vividly. And I just have so much more respect than I did in the past for how much, like how hard that is. So I have a lot of respect for anybody who creates their own work and their own art, genuinely. Oh, sorry, Dr. Strangle, I missed that message. Abstract is with their channel name. Yeah, it's abstract dash section, as Very Nice said. Um, I can never, I don't seem to be able to catch his streams that often, but yeah, let me pull up his channel so people can see. Highly recommend checking out his stuff. I think I wound up, yeah, I tried to find him before. Um, and then for some reason he doesn't like show up on the algorithm. Yeah. Oh, so that's why, because it's ab dash extract section, right? So this is the channel here. Um, yeah, check him out. I need to figure out what his streaming schedule is so that I can hang out more often. But I've definitely enjoyed the streams. It looks like he's covering Crossverse stuff as well, debunking Planetary. So I mean, like we're already in alignment. Naruto fans don't read their series. I need to go back and rewatch this. I think I watched it once before. But yeah, cool dude. Let's see. Hey Shadow, how's it going? Thank you so much for checking out the stream. Hope you're doing well. Love that. I can't really make it out, but it looks like a. Is it a Sasuke icon? I gotta get a better formatted chat window here. Let me see if I can expand this. No, I don't think I was right there, but it looks cool anyway. Um, yeah, thank you so much for stopping by. So I stream on Thursdays at 7 p.m. and usually Eastern Standard Time, United States. So that's that's usually when I do gaming streams, though. Sorry, let me start over. So I stream on Thursday nights every week, and those are gaming streams. So recently we've been playing. We finished up Clair Obscure. We did call it Armored Core 6, and then we're going to be starting some Breath of the Wild stuff next week. I'm a game developer. I forgot if I mentioned that to you in the past, but like my perspective, or like the way that I kind of structure my gaming streams is that I try to play the games casually, but also to do some analysis and commentary on like the things that inspire me about them as a dev. So if that's something that you are interested in, feel free to stop by. And then on Sundays, I used to do streams at 2 p.m. But then I shifted to 6 p.m. just because like I wanted to be spending more time outside in the sun, and just like being away from the computer a little bit. Um, and then and have more time to prep earlier in the day, because what was happening was I would like get up at you know 8 or 9 or whatever, and then just like kind of crunch to get things ready for the stream, especially when I was like getting scans together for the more elaborate streams. And then going on from there, spending all day in front of the computer, I was like, I need more of a break. So that just wound up being more convenient for me at the time. But as I mentioned earlier in the stream, I'm happy to kind of shift the stream around to fit people's schedules. Like I want to be here when it's convenient for people. So I might post a poll in the coming week to see like what time zones people are in, and see if I can adjust to be convenient for that. Um, but let's see. Spitfire also said it's Messenger Toad Danzo killed. Oh yeah. So he couldn't call Naruto back to the village. I remember that little guy. Yeah, he probably didn't get revived by pain. I hope he did. Um, I think it's. I was wondering about that too. About if Gamma Hero and Gamma Ken wind up getting killed and then brought back. So I certainly certainly hope they were. Somebody pointed out that Pain is probably still stuck inside the gourd of the Susanoo, of the Totsuka blade, right? Like I don't think he ever breaks out of that. So still in Boruto, he's just like hanging out there being drunk in a world of illusion. It's kind of funny. Um, but yeah, no worries, Shinigami. I hope everything goes well. Sorry, it says I'm still here. By the way, I might go silent, but that's just because I'm also talking with my girlfriend. Or rather, I'm listening because I'm kind of nonverbal right now. It's just one of those Aspie autism things. If I'm more silent than usual, it's just because I'm listening deeply to her. Not to say I'm not listening to you, but you know how it is. You have a partner. I'm simply a lesbian and I wish to give all my to her. Yes, absolutely. I've said this before. I'll say it again, I'm sure. But I always appreciate you being here. You always bring a lot to the stream. And also, there's never any obligation. You should absolutely put your partner before random person on internet yapping about Naruto. I hope I can bring you some kind of enjoyment, but like however you want to engage in that, whether it's in bits and pieces or like after the stream or whatever, it's cool. I'm just glad to know that you're doing well. I hope the internship stuff goes well as well. Feel free to like keep us updated if you feel like sharing. But yeah, no pressure at all. Very Nice asks, I'm asking more like how strong their physical stats are compared in versus battles. Like, I now think high-level Naruto characters like A and Hashirama are around Mach 260 or something. Yeah, so I'm not, honestly, I don't know that I am the best person to ask about scaling in terms of, like, calcs. I think folks like How About No. By the way, hello, How About No. It's good to see you. Sorry, I missed your message there. How About No and Dr. Strangle are more savvy about the math side of things and can probably give you a more precise answer. I think that like given the character design and the implications of the jutsu and the um, you know, stuff like that, you can. I have no problem with Naruto characters being significantly above the speed of sound. I mean, I don't think we get a specific or precise in-universe explanation for why guys like Eighth Gate mode or whatever it is, or is it Sekizo, lets him like kick the air and navigate through the air in that particular way, or like bend and warp space around him. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but you have to imagine that obviously this is vastly superhuman strength that's allowing them to be able to manipulate reality, for lack of a more precise term, on that level. Like, not change the fabric of the universe, but affect space time, affect gravity. Characters like Kaguya being able to create or manipulate dimensions. Whoever created Kamui, some people think it was Obito, some people think it was he inherited it. I don't know, but like there's obviously like space time manipulation that happens in Naruto as well. So I would probably say that like with chakra, I have no problems with characters being able to uh at the end of the series through certain means survive and generate like the equivalent of nuclear bombs of levels of power again in certain specific circumstances, and the ability to go like multiple times faster than the speed of sound. I don't think they get anywhere near the speed of light. I think there are probably some arguments that some characters can move as fast as lightning and have reaction speeds that are equivalent to lightning, at least the downstroke. I'm not sure about the return stroke. Um, but, I think I kind of feel bad because I'm realizing now that I'm more of like a sort of nagging skeptic, in that I'm like, no, I don't think that works. That doesn't work. That doesn't feel right to me. Like, I'm just like fact checking and saying, no, 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 no. Like, I should probably put more effort into making proactive arguments about here is where I think the characters actually do scale to, and what their upper limits are. I don't know if I would have a specific Mach number, um, but yeah, definitely hypersonic. Not somewhere between like massively hypersonic and uh, below speed of light. Like probably peaking out around lightning timers, and yeah, I don't like, obviously the term nuclear bomb level is completely arbitrary. Like different nuclear explosions can be different sizes and stuff like that, but I definitely don't think they get anywhere near planetary. I think like continental is a huge highball, even given some of the like combo jutsu we see in the games with Naruto and Indra and Hashirama, like combining their abilities. They don't get anywhere near planetary in my opinion. So yeah, I think maybe you can argue that some of the Otsutsuki, with certain interpretations, could get to planetary, and that I'm less angry about. But that starts to get into like Boruto era stuff, and it gets a little bit more outside my direct expertise. So happy to talk about that, but I don't think we even start to encroach on that territory until late in the game in Boruto. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Let's see. Very nice says for strength, multi-city block level. What do you think Hashirama scales to in terms of those terms? Well, if you consider that, and we'll get to this soon, but if you consider like that giant Buddha statue that Hashirama summons as being like, um, it towers above the mountains that are in the Naruto universe, like that are depicted in their vicinity. Now, obviously, like we can't say for sure that a mountain in Naruto is quote unquote mountain level, like that it conveniently fits our tiering system unless we actually measure it, right? But the fact that it is multiple, potentially multiple sizes, multiple times as tall as those mountains are, and that like Madara casually slices through the tops of multiple mountains with his whatchamacallit, with his like Susanoo blade, and doesn't seem to be particularly fatigued after doing so. Also, given stuff like Sasuke being able to create, and Madara as well, being able to create like 8 or 9 giant Chibaku Tensei meteoroids, or meteorites, whatever the proper term for that is, like basically apparently at will. I mean, obviously it's consuming chakra, but they don't seem fatigued by it. Like Sasuke just claps his hands together and then they show up, right? So I mean, that stuff I think we could probably comfortably put them around mountain level. I haven't done the calc, but like I don't think it's crazy to say that somebody who's capable of like decapitating mountains with a single sword slice. Not even with the sword itself, right? Like in the war, he just takes the top off of mountains with the air blast that comes off of the sword, right? That feels very comfortable. Maybe getting up to like island level or something, but once we start to get into country level, that's when I'm like, I don't know. It feels a little excessive. And then by the time we get to continental, I think it really falls off. Like people saying that the Biju bombs are multi-continental, I think is like way out of pocket personally. Um, Shadow says it's 5 a.m. in your place. Oh, dude. Well, thank you for hanging out with us that late. I do hope you get some sleep though. Um, Appreciate you stopping by, but also make sure to, to take care of yourself. Hydrate, stretch, get sleep. All the things that I am terrible at doing myself. How about No says he's debunking planetary because he thinks they're multiversal. Oh, okay, we're fighting then. My misunderstanding. We are now in a fight. No, I'm kidding, of course. I don't know. From what I've heard, it seems like Bleach characters wind up doing weird shit with the cosmology and affecting things like the fiber of reality on a deeper, like vaster level than Naruto characters. So just intuitively, based on what I've seen, I think there are probably more arguments in support of Universal Bleach than Naruto. But that's me coming from a place where I just like find all the Universal Naruto arguments completely unconvincing. So it's like, saying that whatever you're eating is a tastier, more fulfilling meal than whatever's on my plate. And I look at my plate and there's just a couple of crumbs there, and they're like stale bread or something. Like I'm not going to eat them anyway, right? So I don't know how big of a compliment that is, but I would certainly be open to hearing things. The only thing I really know about Bleach is that Yuhabaha, am I saying that right, is basically some sort of unknowable cosmic entity who like when he first encounters Ichigo, like Ichigo can't even understand his name. He's like not capable of cognitively processing what's happening. But then he eventually gets to the level of being able to fight with him and maybe defeat him, like clash with him. And if that's the case, like I don't think that any characters outside of like high tier Otsutsuki, like maybe Ishiki, having a realm in which time or yeah, Ishiki having like his is it the Daikokuten, like the realm where time doesn't flow, maybe Kaguya, maybe like Shibai, like characters like that, start to fuck with the nature of reality in a way that starts to get closer to that. But even then, it's like I don't think it quite gets so cosmic horror. But I don't know. I'm only at like chapter 15, like volume 15 of Bleach or whatever. No, chapter 15 of Bleach. So I can't really speak to it. But yeah, let's see. Oh, his streaming schedule is inconsistent. Yeah, mine used to be, and then I had to like force myself to stick to a schedule because otherwise it was just going to be totally impromptu. But it's hard. It's hard to get into that habit. Um, Make sure to hype up all his videos. Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that. Shadow asks about the Berserk stream. I started it more like rereading as I am reading the things I already saw in the anime. Yeah, I would really like to do a Berserk stream. That's a good point. I think what tends to happen is that I'll have ideas for streams that I want to do, and then I'll come across a video, and then I'll get like upset, and be like, I need to address this. I need to rant about this. But I'm kind of, I feel like I've been saying this for the past 2 or 3 months, but I will say it again. Maybe this will be true this time. I feel like I'm running out of things to say. I feel like I'm slowly starting to be like, okay, I've covered this. I did see that Key and another YouTuber called was it someone and Darky? It's like a double like a collaborative channel like Karma and Buddha, something like that. They have both put out universal videos, and I want to address those sometime in the near future. But then it's like you guys have heard me talk for dozens of hours now about fucking light speed and universal and geography, and it's like those are kind of my big topics of interest. I wanted to talk about the pain fight with Naruto because I think there's some misunderstandings there. I'd love to talk a little bit more about like I guess like the special moments in the series, like size, learning how to be emotional and how to integrate, so to speak. Um, and then Conan's death. I think there are some very powerful moments of imagery and narrative that we haven't really talked about the narrative as much, and I'd like to make sure we cover some of that. But especially since we're moving away from those like special interest topics, so to speak, I think it's a good time to maybe take a break and do a couple Berserk streams. So I will start rereading the series on my own time now that I've like kind of gotten what I wanted to out of the novels, at least for now. And I'll start thinking about ways to discuss it on stream. It would be nice to mix things up. I mean, we did the random Dragon Ball stream last year, and it was super fun. So I think having an occasional stream where we mix things up with another series could be super fun. Um, let's see. Spitfire says game dev. Yeah, I've been working in the games industry for a little while now. I really love making games. I love talking about games. So if at any point you feel like stopping by on Thursday, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. We can always talk about it on Sunday as well. I just try to keep things a little bit more focused on Naruto and a little bit more on gaming on Thursdays, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm totally down to talk about it whenever. Abstracting snow. Yeah, that's right. Like we've talked before about their durability. I think I must have brought up and like I'm sticking to my streak now. I bring it up every fucking stream. Minato getting that wood splinter in his shin. Like I think I think that's something that me and Abstract have connected on before, where we both basically agree that Naruto characters are, excuse me, are human beings that then supplement their human anatomy with chakra defenses. But if you were to like sneak up even on like Madara, like EMS Madara, when he was asleep and like poke him with a sharp stick, that you could probably still draw blood. It's not like Superman where you try to. I think it's Superman. Like I saw this clip a little while ago of somebody trying to draw blood from Superman, and the needle kept breaking on his skin, or like Goku taking a like a 223 round or whatever to the head from a rifle and just being okay with it as a little kid. Like he's upset, but he doesn't get injured. He doesn't draw blood, if I remember correctly from Part One Dragon Ball. So I don't think that they're on that level. But would the Susanoo block bullets? Sure, I don't have a problem with that. Would the Mikakashi's mud wall in the novel blocks like volleys of cannon, like artillery siege fire, right? So, but they have to be like actively using it intentionally, right? I just saw your message. How about no? Kid Goku deals with bullets better than Super Goku. Do they bring like actual human weaponry back later in the series? I mean, I know there's that like filler episode, right, where Nappa fights the Navy or whatever. So I feel like I have a vague memory of somebody firing a rocket launcher at Majin Buu at one point, but I don't know. It's been a long time. Um, let's see. They might be, yeah, the kunai level, yeah. Earlier stream would definitely be better for me, but if later is better for everyone else, then that's whatever. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll try to keep the streams to under 5 hours or 6 hours going forward, so that if you do want to hang out, you're not missing anything. that was, yeah, that was super fun, the long streams recently, but also, like, I've seen Walkie Talkie go for, like, 8 hours before. I'm like, I don't know how you guys do that, man. It's, like, it's super fun, but also super exhausting. Let's see. But I'll consider that, yeah, the earlier stream. You sent your design Shinigami. Awesome. Yeah, I'll check them out after the stream. Thank you for being willing to share that. Dr. Strangle says no random person on the internet over personal life. Well, as much as I'm flattered by the suggestion, I would rather encourage people to be somewhat healthy. Source, I held my hands up like a picture frame masculine. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, honestly, at this point, like I've softened up a lot in ways and gotten a lot more strict in other ways, so to speak. Like after spending the past couple of years in power scaling discussions, I place a lot more value on just like nuanced personal interpretation than I used to. In other words, like I think I've said explicitly for a few times now that I think headcanon is great and healthy. I don't think headcanon really belongs in a debate. I think if you show up and you're trying to like competitively argue a stance and you're like, well, in my opinion is better than your opinion, that's not going to go anywhere. But in terms of like an understanding of the series, I used to have this assumption that people who did like rigorous power scaling and debates and stuff like that, because they would have to be framing and formatting their logic in a more intellectually rigorous way, this would necessarily lead to them having a more precise understanding of the series. What I have actually found to be the case is that that particular paradigm of thinking winds up filtering out a whole lot of nuance and context, and it leads to this sort of like, well, if you can't prove that like through some sort of philosophical argumentation, then it's unreasonable to believe it. And at the end of the day, I get that, but we're also interpreting art, and the process of like understanding like narrative and character development and the nuance of like phrases being said in certain context isn't going to necessarily come out of that kind of rigorous analysis, right? You need to have the right tools for the right jobs. And I think I've used the analogy before of like trying to wash a window with a hammer. it's probably just not going to work out. So there's a place for power scaling, and there's a place for calcs and analysis, and there's also a place for, um, you know, a more nuanced narrative approach. And I have found videos like Sybil's awesome analysis of like queer love in Naruto, to be in like Sage's Reigns videos on like analyzing different characters and stuff, to be much more impressive than a debate where somebody screams at another like, no, this is logically flawed and I'm smarter than you for an hour. So just saying. I don't mind the eyeballing thing at all. I think that like that's the way that a majority of people are going to interact with the series, and that's totally fine. It's good to be a skeptic. Yes, I do agree with that. I do think that there is sort of a violent backlash towards skepticism, by certain proponents of the community, and that can really shut down conversation. I think that some people can use skepticism in, I guess, what you would call a toxic way, in that basically they just use their own incredulity masked as skepticism to avoid engaging with the arguments that other people make. And that kind of sucks, but also I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about, like, hey, if you make a claim and I have a contention with that claim, me being skeptical about that and surfacing the contention to you, that's not just me shooting you down. That's me saying, hey, I actually respect you enough to consider this topic seriously. Here's how we can progress and continue working on this idea together, right? It doesn't have to be adversarial. But, when we talked about Noodles' conversations with Six and Shad and Troy and all that, it's like he tried to develop this new meta, I guess, where if he detected somebody being skepticism, he would just say, "Oh, being skeptical." I mean, I'm strawmanning a bit here, but like being skeptical means you're being regressive to power scaling. I remember Seth in particular on a couple of his streams being like extremely upset, like screeching about skeptical people. He used much less kind words, but basically saying something along the lines of, this is my argument, and if you don't like it, you're being too skeptical and you want too much information, you want too much evidence. And that to me is a massive red flag. If somebody is like, here, this is the truth, and if you don't accept it, then it's because your standard of evidence is too high. That might be the case, but also like that's a really slippery slope towards like gaslighting. And since there is actual gaslighting that happens a lot in the community, I think we should be very cautious and judicious about saying things like that. Usually they're not warranted. Um, so let's see. You agree with those takes, Spitfire? Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that we kind of see eye to eye about that. But of course, if you guys wind up disagreeing with me, like, I like that. I like having the opportunity to learn, and I'm not going to learn when if just everybody automatically agrees. As an example, how about no? I think you were the one in my previous stream. You pointed out something where I was making an argument about. Oh shit! I just had it. It's on the tip of my tongue. But like, yeah, I think we were talking about shape transformation with Kyrian, and like I pointed out that I didn't think it was possible to apply shape transformation to Kyrian because it wasn't made of chakra. And then you said, well, what about like Gara's sand or something? And so, like, yeah, the way that you wound up challenging me on that got me thinking about it more, and I think added more context to it. So I appreciate that, for what it's worth. Um, Very nice says lightning arcs at Mach 260. Oh, okay, gotcha. I use a more rigorous method than just my eyes, but I don't do physics calc is what I mean. Yeah, that seems reasonable. The slowest air lightning transmissions is Mach 260. I'm more so very lenient with a lot of things in scaling because the story can only show me so much. I'm more so asking, what can they do with taijutsu in your opinion? How good do you think the verse gets in terms of AP? In terms of striking strength, I mean, like, Sakura is not the strongest character in the verse by any means, uh, but she is sort of narratively framed alongside, not equivalent to, but alongside, late war arc Naruto and Sasuke. And we have these vague statements about how she's not going to fall behind them and she's able to um, damage Kaguya and stuff like that. If you look at how strong she impacts the ground when she first awakens for Byakugo, she's like creating a massive crater that's knocking things asunder. She like she basically like splits the earth and creates all of these like massive crevices and fragmentations and like sends boulders flying and sends a lot of like Tentails clones flying and stuff like that, right? So if you use that as a baseline and then look at stuff like Madara and Sasuke, both forming and then dropping down all their meteors and Chibaku Tensei spheres and stuff like that, you think about the amount of Earth that's displaced from that, and you just imagine all of that force being channeled into a strike like Sakura does. I, again, like I'm not that deep into the calcs and stuff, but I have no problem being like that's probably got to be well beyond city level, city block level for sure, probably exceeding mountain level, probably getting into like maybe low country or something like that. But I don't know. I'm not as familiar with the tiering system specifically. Um, I'll just say that I don't think that it gets complicated, it gets muddy because once you start to get to like characters like Kaguya, the temptation is to be like Kaguya creates dimensions that have planets and stars potentially in them, right? So maybe we could just put her at star level because of that. Okay, so Kaguya is star level. She gets hit by Naruto and Naruto hurts her, so Naruto hurts a star level character, therefore Naruto is star level. But that doesn't mean that Naruto himself is necessarily going to be outputting the amount of energy with one of his claw swipes, like the one that he uses to blitz Kaguya after Obito dies, to actually like tear asunder a sun, right? Like I don't actually see physical evidence on the page that there is equivalent force in his in his swipe to overcome the gravitational binding energy of a star. I don't think that really checks out. So whatever scaling chains we create, I think we have to be aware of like be sure that we're matching up a given character's AP against another character's durability, and we have to know what the anti-feats for that durability are. I don't think it's always safe to assume that just because a character has a given AC or DC or AP or DC feat that their durability scales to that. With taijutsu, that might be the case. I know there's the whole, was it Newton's third law or whatever, that like when you impart a force to an object, the same force gets imparted back to you just in the opposite vector. So people will use that phrase like characters should be able to withstand the counterforce of their own punches. I think there's probably more nuance to that subject, but okay, if you can demonstrate that a given character can hit hard enough to be equivalent to like I don't know, small country level, then you might, if it's purely taijutsu, right? Then you might be able to say, okay, this character has a like small country level durability, and then another character overcomes that durability, so that character has superior to small country level AP, right? You can start to build chains like that. It gets complicated really quickly because you have to make sure that you're testing the attack against the defense, not just testing the attack vaguely against the person overall, if that makes sense. That's just like that's the way that I look at it, as more of a narrative focused power scaler, if that makes sense. Let me know what you think about all that. Shinigami says not that much of a compliment. Not sure. Dr. Strangle says, as somebody who has researched the Bleach universal scaling. Oh yeah, with the bread and the yeah okay. With the universal scaling, you have to ignore the nuances of cosmology to say that the character scale the cosmology. That makes sense. Yeah, I would need to study it more before I like take a strong stance on it either way. But I think I appreciate like where you're coming from there. How about No says Kid Goku deals with bullets better than Goku? Oh yeah, we talked about that briefly. Super Goku gets shot and it draws blood. Oh damn, okay. By random goons. Same for Krillin. I'm genuinely surprised to hear that, but that's kind of cool to know. This is in Dragon Ball Super. Yeah, because you said Super Goku. Then again, bullets are also a threat to planet pulling Wonder Woman, meteor slicing, Kenpachi, Planet Buster Boo. Yeah, guns don't kill people. The writer does. Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Like, does it really make sense for Minato to get wounded by like a little piece of wood when characters like Sasuke with his Susanoo active like shatter metal, and he is the Hokage, right? Like he is the leader of the village. He's positioned to be, if not the strongest, then in the upper tier of characters within the village. I don't know. Maybe you guys think that like versus Danzo era Sasuke is stronger than Minato. That's fine, but like well, that's actually probably pretty spicy now that I think about it. But like I think that there's that the more I look into this, power scaling doesn't necessarily always fit the manga perfectly. In other words, the author is perfectly within their rights to quote unquote make a character weaker or stronger, or let a character get hurt or survive something based on what they want to do with the story at a given time. Like, yes, authors care about creating some sort of scaling and relativity in their world. That doesn't mean that they are like pulling out a tier list and a rubric and making sure that everything is like perfectly calibrated. I think a perfect example, right, is if you go through, and Doctor Strangle actually, you kind of did this a bit, right? Like if you go through and look at every time the curvature of the Earth is shown, it's not necessarily consistent throughout the whole series. Sometimes a big explosion will be silhouetted against the horizon, and the horizon will be curved to emphasize the strength of the explosion. But Kishimoto also like is a huge cinema buff. Like he mentions his obsession with film and a lot of the post chapter like personal anecdotes and stuff in the volume releases. And so he often talks about using fisheye lenses as an example to try to make things seem more cinematic. So you have to keep into account that like he might just be playing up the proportions and dimensions and trying to emulate a filmic technique rather than specifically giving us this numerical calc and being like, oh, I want you guys to understand that Datara is objectively like small country level when he uses C0 or whatever. Like, I don't think he's thinking about it that way. Um, but yeah, it can vary a lot. Dr. Strangle says one man's headcanon is another man's agenda. Yes, yes. That can be the case. So there's some nuance to that as well. Saria says that how about no guns, don't people, swords kill people. My God. Barry Nice says I 100% agree. Power scaling is interpretive, and I think the eyeballing tendency is better because you're right. It is the generally observed reaction to the text, and I want to build on that. Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think that in theory, like developing a level of scrutiny and analysis that is based on like fact and math and stuff like that. There's nothing inherently wrong with doing that. Doing so can actually increase your understanding of a series from a certain point of view, but it's a specific tool, it's a specific filter. And like I'm trying to think of a good example, but you know, you can put on I don't know if this works. You can put on like 3D goggles, and that will help you see a 3D movie better. But then if you keep those same goggles on and watch a regular movie, the colors might just look all fucked up. Somewhere in there is like a like the dregs of an analogy that will hopefully make sense. Um, Shinigami says that's why I shifted to intelligence debates because it has more room for skepticism and encourages more critical thinking. Though to be fair, I was at first tired of the glazing Naruto was getting versus the unfair treatment towards Bleach, and I went, wait, hold on. Yeah, though it also began when Seth and Suikage mocked DBZ and glazed Naruto. Yeah, I'd actually love to hear more about the your perception of that because frankly as like somebody who grew up reading Naruto, I was really shocked to hear people talking about uh Naruto characters being planetary as if it was a given, and then being like universal might even be a low ball. It was just so completely divorced from what my experience of the series was personally. I didn't know enough about it at the time, so I just kind of accepted it for a while until I understood things a little bit better. But I tried to figure out like how did we even get here? Because it doesn't. I would never have gotten to those conclusions myself. Was I totally like delusional or whatever, or like how did I wind up with such a vastly different perception as other folks in the community, right? And I think that some of it is just misunderstanding, misinterpretation. A lot of it comes from the data books, but also reading the comments sections of certain like multiversal, universal videos. You'll see people saying stuff like, "Thank you, Key or Noodles or whoever else. Thank you for making these videos because um, Naruto has been getting slandered and downballed, or like, is that the right term for it? Lowballed, like too much in the community. All the Bleach guys, they get to make multiversal arguments. All the Dragon Ball guys, they get to make uh, universal, multiversal arguments and stuff like that. Naruto has been lagging behind him and so like slandered and lowballed for so long. Finally, someone comes along and proves to all those jerks that Naruto can be just as cool as Goku or as Ichigo or whoever, right? And so I think that there's a genuine desire sometimes from within our community to feel like we catch up to the big boys, so to speak. Like we're putting a certain amount of our emotional investment in don't quote me on that, downbald. Um, we're putting a certain amount of our emotional investment in the characters and like our hopes and aspiration for the characters in terms of their raw power output, and we maybe feel like our series is less sexy or less cool compared to others because our characters aren't like instant transmitting around the planet and blowing up galaxies or whatever, like Broly or whatnot, right? But I don't think that's ever been the point of Naruto. Like, your characters don't have to scale arbitrarily above any other metric in order to be inherently cool or tell cool stories. So I get the desire, that makes sense, but also I feel like it's just a big smokescreen. Like, it or just kind of misses the point, right? And we wind up looking kind of goofy, in my opinion. Um, yeah. More room for skepticism and more critical thinking is definitely a highly positive thing. Totally agree. Um, Larry says, curious why the Triforce made you think about Laser Circus from Naruto. Oh, so as I was thinking about this, I wasn't entirely sure that I got it right, so I wanted to think about it some more. I think we talked about this before, so sorry if I'm repeating myself here. But basically, uh, the arrows that are light arrows, they are fired from a bow. The arrows themselves are made out of light, out of condensed light, focused light, laser light, whatever you want to call it. But that light is like a projectile that is attached to the bow. The bow is being drawn back with a string, and the speed of the projectile being fired out of the bow would still be determined by the tension of the string. So the fact that it is objectively described as made out of light, if what I said just now is true, doesn't mean that the projectile is actually moving at the speed of light, right? The projectile is formed from light, but it still is traveling based on the tension of the bowstring when it's released. So I thought about Laser Circus as well. Like, it's described explicitly as being made of light, but does that mean that the projectile itself, the way it's warping and twisting and actually traveling to the target, that is moving at SOL? And I think that would be a way of kind of like a good metaphor for describing that. But now I'm closing my eyes and I'm picturing in my head like Zelda's holding the bow, she has the bowstring and she lets go of it, and then the way I'm remembering it now in my mind is that there is like just a beam of light that quote unquote instantly travels from her to Ganon, right? Like, it basically is just like she's firing a laser, in which case my analogy wouldn't work. But I don't really remember. Um, Let me know what you think. Let's see. Oh, hey, Cloud Axel, how's it going? Good to see you. Axel says the world would be affected if it was hit by a meteor the size of Tokyo. Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? We talked before about how if a baseball in the real world is thrown at the speed of light, how it would basically cause like a nuclear explosion. It would cause like a massive explosion, and so if these characters are actually moving at the speed of light, we have to suspend our default understanding of physics in the Naruto universe, because or just like there are fewer assumptions that we can make, I guess, is a way to put it, about how physics works in Naruto. Also, I'm noticing that my mic levels appear kind of low, so I'm going to boost my mic a little bit. Let me know if this works. Hopefully this doesn't sound too loud. Test 1 2 1 2. Hopefully that's okay. And I'll bring up the music a little bit to match. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to this after the fact because I've been like messing around with my mic setup. Let's see. So, Shinigami, I'm sorry, I don't really understand your question. You were asking what does even mean nuances? What if you're asking me what I mean by nuance? I mean that, like, you know, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, let's say that the databook has a statement that Kaguya, yeah, so like the entry for Ameno Minaka in the fourth databook says something along the lines of, uh, Kaguya like weaves and creates dimensions as she pleases, right? Creating dimensions as she pleases, blah blah blah. In an instant, she can move the world to. She's in together with other people to a different dimension, right? So sometimes people will look at this and they'll be like, creating dimensions as she pleases. It literally says this here, therefore it is, objectively true. But if you go back to the series and you actually see like what happens, and you listen to all the like different people's different takes and perspectives on what is happening, it doesn't seem like she's actually creating new universes because or like creating and destroying spaces arbitrarily like from nothing, because there's a time, I forget exactly what it is, but there's a time in the fight where like Kaguya's in the root time space, and then Kakashi's in the ice time space, and then somebody else, Obito and Sakura are in the desert, but then they open up a portal to the acid world, which means the acid one still exists as well. And I think there's one other character somewhere else. So it's like there are at least three, four, maybe five of these dimensions that exist simultaneously. That does not get mentioned here, but if you take this statement literally, you wind up missing out on the nuance of what's actually going on there. And also like I don't know like what people's opinions of this will be, but I think Sybil makes a really interesting argument that there is a queer reading of Naruto that is valid. Not that necessarily Kishimoto wanted to write a gay love story into Naruto, but like the themes are there, and you can argue that they sort of emerge from the text under a certain perspective. But that if you're just like, well, Sasuke and Naruto both get married to women, therefore there can't be any like love between them that's like gay love in any regard whatsoever, then that's not really looking at all the nuance of their relationship and not considering a more nuanced definition of what the term love could mean, right? So I guess that's what I'm saying, is that there oftentimes when we're talking about literature at all, there are different ways to interpret things, and it's actually okay to take things in a bit of an abstract direction, if that makes sense sometimes. Um, let's see. Dragon Ball sound. Oh, down ball sounds like a. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like something below the belt. Um, Oh no says, I also call this the Mappa problem because some cool fight drops and suddenly casuals thinks the anime version is beating everyone ever, and you can check and it's like a 1 kiloton feed at best. Yeah, I mean, I think fucking Gurren Lagann is Trigger, not Mappa, right? But I don't remember for sure. But there are definitely some anime out there where like, yeah, if you take what's happening literally, then characters are throwing entire galaxies at each other, using them as weaponry, as shuriken, basically. Then that gets feats to crazy levels. Um, I'm sure there are some anime out there where characters are literally like belching out entire universes at one another, using the fabric of reality as a weapon. But I think Saria said something about like Saint Seiya and maybe Sailor Moon having like crazy creation feats like that. So anyway, for consistency for the Zelda point, the actual like search spotlights in the game have travel time goofy. Oh yeah, that is pretty goofy. Forgot about that. The thing about Bleach is that the cosmological destruction is more of a like House of Cards, structurally unraveling the world due to how spiritually bound it is rather than with force. That makes sense. So like if I let me know if you think this analogy works. Like if I light a fire with a lighter that then winds up burning down an entire forest, that doesn't necessarily mean that I, John, have forest level AP, whatever that means, right? Like the force that I actually personally exerted there was just the amount of force that it took me to depress the lighter trigger, whatever you call it, right? The flint, and to create that spark. I didn't even really produce the heat uh of the lighter itself, right? So I certainly didn't produce the heat of the entire forest fire. So you're kind of saying that like characters in the Bleach universe, they can push at the bottom of the House of Cards a little bit, which then causes the whole thing to topple over. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they could, you know, disassemble the whole thing from the top down, like the opposite way, something like that. The nuances of Bleach time. Oh, okay, sorry. I think I misunderstood you, Shinigami, but hopefully my response made some sense. Let's see. The light arrows shoot straight and true, as the game describes them, and then nowadays even the bow itself is made of pure. Oh, okay, gotcha. That adds context for sure. I don't know if you've seen Age of Imprisonment clips, but Zelda uses the bow of light, and it's pure light in her hand that dissipates when she's done. I think that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, I know you've showed some of those clips to me in the past, and I think that might be like where I was getting my wires crossed, because I think I want to say in Ocarina of Time in the final spoilers, but in the final fight against Ganon, there is like a little bit of travel time. It's not instantaneous, but I couldn't even remember if that was true. So I'm not sure. Um, Shinigami says, because I saw almost all the arguments and there is always context ignored or made up, I actually conversation with people still claiming it's through Soul Cycle, even though Kisuke specified it's irrelevant in the TYBW anime. Yeah, well, I mean, like, this is something that comes up too, is that sometimes, like, people in the community will come up with a theory based on their interpretation of the work, and then somebody will say, hey, the author actually came out and debunked this and clarified it, and then the first party will say, hey, death of the author, buddy, death of the author, I win. And it's like, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to get into a whole conversation about death of the author specifically. I do think it is an interesting and potentially quite nuanced conversation, whether or not the authors get to hold creative ownership after on a work of art after it's already been released. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's kind of it's not like a trump card that wins you the fight. Spitfire, I just saw your question. We're gonna get to it soon. You will find that a lot of these streams, we wind up having like an hour and a half discussion for the first part of the stream, and then we get on to the actual analysis after that. So probably within the next 15 minutes, I think. For people watching the VOD back, I'm trying to get into the habit these days of watching the video back and then the next day leaving timestamps. So if you just want to skip to the Woodman discussion, I will leave a time code in the video once I've reviewed it after the fact. Saint Seiya mentioned, yeah, I really should add that to my repertoire, or to like my watch list rather. Yeah, no worries. I appreciate you asking. I tend to ramble a lot, so it's totally fair to ask. Very Nice says, not multi-city level. I think Naruto characters are multi-city block level and physicals at the top tiers, still vulnerable to high tier bullets. Yeah, I mean, like, obviously this can get recontextualized later because the fucking, what's his name? The Asura path is literally shooting missiles, in the attack on, Konoha. But we reviewed last time that in the first art book, Kishimoto has a statement where he's like, I will never, ever introduce, like, guns to this universe because no character, like, no shinobi could withstand the power of a gun, and certainly not, like, missiles and rocket launchers, right? But that was the first art book, and that was, like, I think before Sasuke Retrieval arc. So things did change, but also that was the initial paradigm and design for the series, right? So, Sorry says, I'm once again saying Minako was better than Usagi Justice for Sailor Venus. I'm not going to dispute that for sure. Let's see, The Forsaken Fortress. Yeah, I need to go back and replay Wind Waker for sure. Let's see. Shinigami says, perception in what aspect when you mentioned for intelligence? Yeah, I'll ask you to clarify that, please, because I think I lost the train of thought there. What are you referring to with regards to perception? How about No says, and Sasuke out of chakra gets hit by C0, so like the argument that actually chakra doesn't matter to Dura inherently has some points to it. Oh, Knocked Out Naruto did just survive like a continent-sized blast that made a gigantic hole in the moon in the last. Yeah, I'd have to go back and rewatch that. I thought what happened is that, like, Toneri used the Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion, and then Naruto, like, deflected it with Kurama Sage Mode in his hand or something, but I haven't seen that movie in a little while, so I'd have to go back and look at it. But yeah, it makes it. Well, then we get into an interesting conversation, I think, about, like, fall off of energy, right? Like, the amount of energy required to generate, you know, a nuclear bomb going off. People standing at the epicenter of the explosion versus, like, half a mile away are obviously going to get different amounts of energy put onto them, for lack of a better phrase. So I would be curious to know, like, how far away he was and how that affects the calc, but I don't feel like I should try to dispute it without, like, seeing it directly, right? Dr. Strangle says, my lighter burns down an entire forest, so it is city level. My hand can tank the lighter, so you have city level durability. Does the light trick and goes whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Yes. I'm picturing you that now just doing that and being like, yes, watch my city level durability hand go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Honestly, I feel like people will make those tiers of arguments and debates sometimes, and it's, at least with, like, the walkie-talkie guys, like, they will introduce arguments like that, but it's very clearly tongue-in-cheek and part of the bit, and it can be kind of fun and refreshing in a way to hear people play with arguments like that, because it can still be fun to try to figure out how to engage with them. But yeah, obviously wouldn't take it super seriously, and I don't think that they do either. um just going off of their debate with Sage on Hashirama, actually. Senjumaru shook the whole realms with his spiritual presence. I feel like I've heard about that before, yeah. Um, Saria says, I hate how people use Death of the Author on the internet. TBH is the same way people misuse media literacy. Yeah, they just play it like a trap card, like in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever, to be like, haha, I win, and without actually understanding it. And it can be very obnoxious. It doesn't mean you can just rewrite the story. Death of the Author means that the intent of an author does not invalidate alternative readings of their work as long as those readings are supported by details within the text. Yeah, absolutely. And, like, I think that it's also kind of ridiculous to me to be like, understanding an author has zero relevance on their work. Like, understanding that Kishimoto is a film addict and loves movies and like loves The Matrix and stuff like that, like, is that really like completely irrelevant to how he designed his world? I don't think so. Like, basically, if an author says, hey, I love The Matrix, I was obsessed with that movie and I directly took inspiration from it, and then you get to the shit where people are being put inside perfect little dream worlds that are custom tailored to make them happy, while their energy gets sucked out and used as a fuel source, essentially, from an invading, like, non-human species. You look at that and you're like, nah, there's nothing to do with that, that's completely irrelevant, Death of the Author, buddy. And like, no, like, like, obviously, I think it enhances your understanding of the series in the same way that, like, I don't know that there's any sort of objective argument that the that the Matrix is supposed to be a trans narrative, period, right? But understanding that the transitions that, like, the transition that Lana underwent, Lana Wachowski, and like her identity, uh, and then going back and looking at Neo, like, I saw a very convincing video that broke down how, even if it wasn't overtly intentional, Neo's story is something that, like, trans viewers can really empathize with and relate to, and how it overlaps with a lot of trans folks' experiences before transitioning, and then, like, what it's like to kind of awaken their true self and, like, embrace their true identity, and how essentially, like, um, Agent Smith constantly calling Neo Mr. Anderson and refusing to accept his name is, like, basically a metaphor for dead naming. And, again, like, it's not up to me to say whether or not that's quote unquote true, but understanding what Lana went through as a person and what her journey was, I think it would be really closed-minded and myopic to say, like, that has nothing to do with the story of The Matrix. I only think that, like, it can help you deepen your understanding and appreciation of it if you understand, like, her story, if that makes sense. Shinigami also says, like, it was when I was talking about why I shifted to intelligence, and you said you're curious about my perception of this when people kept talking about empower scaling senses. Oh, yeah, I think that there can be a, well, something that I've run into recently is the idea of, like, mental amps and mental nerfs. I think that because characters can sometimes have these emotional states that are associated with power bursts, that they then go on to assume that, like, I don't know, they can use intellect as a fuel source almost, and that certain characters get smarter, then that can amplify their power output, which I don't think is how that works. But yeah, I think I might be getting a little off topic. That's okay though. Let's see. How about No says Golden Wheel reincarnation is a later scene where he overpowers a sword with his fist. Okay, the hole in the moon is when he gets his chakra pushed out of him earlier. Okay, yeah, I'll have to go back and rewatch that, because, I mean, like, pretty soon we're going to talk about Universal again, so I better go bone up on it. Very Nice says, sorry, as I agree, but I also think that the author doesn't get to go back and rewrite their own story either. No J.K. Rowling, Hermione is black retcons. Yeah, I think we should probably... Well, that's the thing, right? I think that, like, if we as a community have formed attachments and interpretations of Harry Potter, anything that comes out of J.K. Rowling's, like, very confused brain these days shouldn't necessarily go back and tarnish it, like, our love of the series. But also, I mean, I don't want to get into a whole thing about this tonight, although we could make it a topic for the future. But when you go back and you actually, like, recognize what like some of the political stances that she's weaving in, some of the like class statements and perspectives, like her the whole thing about like Hermione kind of being like demonized and like ridiculed for spew. Um, there's some actually really sketchy stuff in those books that winds up not at all being surprising once you learn. Oh, so sorry about that. I dropped something. When once you learn about her like her current political stance, I would say this is a whole fucking like this is a whole thing, right? There's a whole thing. So be prepared to like get into it. But if you go check out check out this video. I'll post a link in chat if it lets me. This is a great, very calm. Well, I like this person's stuff a lot. As you can see, I've listened to a lot of his stuff, many of these multiple times, and he does a really great job breaking down the topic. ContraPoints also has a great video on the topic. Yeah, I highly recommend checking that out if you're interested in that. But I'll cut myself off before I go on like a whole long rant. Death of the author or post-structuralism, go burn. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, says I take the author extremely seriously. It's why I don't separate the art from the artist, because an artist wouldn't separate themselves from their art. Yeah. Just look at online at watermarks. Yeah, whether it's from like a legal or like art ownership standpoint, or just from like again, quick tangent, but I used to be in like punk and noise bands, and one of the things that I did to try to contribute to the community was that I ran like a little blog where I would interview people from different punk bands and like get to know them and talk about their music. And one of the bands that I interviewed, like halfway through the interview, he's like, "You keep asking me all these questions about like my inspiration and my meanings. Like, what do you mean?" And I was a little confused, and we talked about it for a second. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, I don't put my emotions into my music at all. Like when I sit down to write something, I just think about like what would tactically make a good song, and then I just kind of like analyze it and write something that that kind of comes to mind and that functions." And it's so weird because then you listen to his songs and they're like, when he performs, he's like screaming his lungs out and he's like crying, and he's talking about like how his breakups and stuff like that, and like how people left him and how he was abandoned. And then you talk to him in the interview and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just thought that was a cool story. Like that never happened to me. I don't have any attachment to any of that." But then you talk to other people, and like everything that they produce, they're pouring their heart and soul into. So I guess it's important to understand where somebody is coming from if you want to understand how and why they make their art. And it can vary so vastly from person to person that it's like, it's fascinating. At the very least, it's a conversation worth having, I think, if you care about the art. Yeah, I don't think authors know what they want. Like, if you ever met anyone that had their shit 100% together, no, I'm not convinced that such people actually exist. Okay, so to answer your question again, Spitfire, with the intro catching up out of the way, and I'll put a timestamp. 1 sec, might be a loud sound. I apologize. 3, 2, 1. Well, that wasn't too bad. Getting some water. Okay, so I want to talk about Hashirama, and specifically I want to talk about the claim that Hashirama is the strongest. There are 2 videos that kind of inspired my desire to want to talk about this topic. The first was this debate from a while ago between the Walkie Talkie guys and Sage of the Calves. I think the debate starts somewhere around here. So like there's a little bit of a preamble, and then Sage joins and they start talking about it. And then it goes on for a while. I don't think it goes the full video, but it goes on for quite some time. But a lot of the main points that they talk about, Sage winds up recapping in this video over here. Some of the points he changes up a little bit, some of them he doubles down on, and this kind of this combined with his like recent tier list video was what made me want to get into the topic. I think for tonight, especially given like the time we have left, what I want to do is just walk through a bunch of different scenes with Hashirama in them, so that we can develop a basis of understanding of what his overall power level is and how it correlates to other characters around this point of the story. And, excuse me. And then next time we can go into Sage's video. Mostly just want to talk about the first part. I don't know if we'll need to do the whole thing, but basically The goal here again is not to single out Sage and be like, this guy is stupid. I'm lots more smarter than him is, and you listen to me instead of him, not and me instead. Like, I'm not trying to capitalize the conversation here or whatever, like to dominate the conversation. But I do think that like the after listening to this video and then re-listening to part of the debate over here, I empathize with Sage in a certain way, and I think that excuse me, empathize with Sage in a certain way, and I think that the mistake that's being made here is not even necessarily his fault. It actually kind of evokes a bit of pathos when you think about like what's actually going on under the surface. I don't want to sound condescending, but I do kind of just feel bad for the guy because I think that there is let's just say a meta or like a paradigm of something within the community of how do we deal with contradictions and find nuance within those contradictions. We're just not very good at it, and sometimes it can like make for a lot of confusion. So my goal here is tonight, let's just talk about Hashirama himself and see what we can learn about him. And then once we have gone through the process of gathering our data and our information, let's go back here and try to see if we can solve the same questions that Sage was trying to solve and see if we can get to different answers, and if not, like why or why not, right? So basically, the premise that Sage makes in his video and the sort of starting point that we're going to take for this analysis is that Hashirama is the strongest. And you'll notice that that in and of itself is kind of vague, right? What does it mean to be the strongest? Well, both in this video and I think in the one where he talks about he debated with Jay the Great, the definition of strongest is kind of left a little vague or a little tautological. Him being the strongest just means that he is the strongest in some capacity. Now, I think that the general like consensus interpretation is that we can assume that if he is the strongest, that means that he scales above other characters, and he is the strongest in some sort of holistic, like overall battle sense. So I think that's the core point that's being made here. But let me see. I want to see if I can actually find the statement about him that Sage was talking about specifically on Naruto Versity. So I think that we could also just look at it in his video. But Yamato Hashirama actually, right, so we'll come back to this. Strongest barrier, strongest spear, strongest genjutsu, evidence of burning. I want to make sure that I find this very specific phrase. I can't remember if it's like a jutsu file thing. Okay, so this is redundant. Give me 1 second to kind of figure out where it is. It's made a little bit more difficult because people don't always mention it in their videos either. Yeah, okay, so I'll have to find it as we go. I think it's around here actually. 1 second. Maybe somebody knows what I'm looking for. It's yeah, I don't want to waste too much time like scrounging for this. So let me see if I can dive into Sage's video and find where the specific argument he used is, because I don't want to wind up strawmanning here. So this is the peerless statement. That's not what I'm looking for. Should have prepared this beforehand. Well, if I can't find it, we'll just dive into understanding like the analysis of the fight itself, and then we can get to the statement later. Basically, the statement that I'm looking for is somewhere in the 4th data book. There's a statement about Yamato or his wood style or something like that. And the statement goes something along the lines of, since Yamato has this wood style was a hallmark of the first Hokage, Hashirama, and this is one piece of evidence that Hashirama is the strongest. And it doesn't really say what is meant by the strongest. And Sage, I think, uses that as kind of like the platform of his argument. They might have mentioned it in the debate. I think they did early on. So let me see if I can find that. And if not, that's fine. I will find it for next time. And in the meantime, we're just looking for Hashirama's overall strength, right? Drama, charisma, blah, 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 blah. So let's see. Is it here? It might be this. Yeah, okay, so here we go. So keeping in mind that this is also Sage's own translation, right? And he's not a native speaker. But we'll talk more about like the translation later. I know that the whole thing, right? But this is the page that Sage put forward as his piece of evidence. I guess it's from a page 165 in the fourth data book, and the quote specifically is, for Orochimaru, whose insatiable ambition is immortality, Hashirama's regenerative ability was a key subject of research. The goal was finding the secrets hidden in those cells. In order to make that power their own, experiments were repeated, and it was abused for the development of forbidden jutsu. Yamato, a clone of the first Hokage, is also a sorrowful byproduct. That peerless trait is one piece of evidence that Hashirama is the strongest shinobi. So again, not to try to strawman or anything like that, but my understanding of this is that this phrase, one piece of evidence that Hashirama is the strongest shinobi, then gets extrapolated to mean that in some capacity, some undefined capacity, Hashirama is the strongest shinobi, and that's what then we will need to evaluate. So let's go through the chapters. Let's point out a couple of things and start to build like an understanding of what happens over the course of the series itself, and then next time we'll do the analysis of the video itself. And speak of the individuals in question, the walkie-talkie folks are here. Welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Yeah, I was listening to this earlier today, and to your debate, and the arguments that you came up with about like Sakura and Ino, and like how she defines what was it, like she defines shinobi, or like the strong, yeah, this thing over here. She defines fearless. So they were saying that like Sakura in her fight against defines the term peerless as it being literally, the definition thereof being the magnitude of Ino's obsession with her long flowing hair and superficial appearances, so that when Hashirama is described as being peerless, what he's really described as is having like the greatest amount of obsession with long flowing hair and superficial appearances, which is one of the most creative arguments that I've heard, period. And I fucking lost it laughing at that shit. That was great. Yeah, you guys and I, we've talked about my feelings about the whole Hashirama strongest thing, but kind of inspired by your super entertaining and fun conversation over the course of this stream, and then also going back to Sage's video, I wanted to dive into the topic, and I wanted to just review it for myself and see what conclusions I could come to. Suffice to say that I am in agreement with you, I think, about the overall like take here. I did really appreciate, by the way, how you addressed the differences between statistics and oh, is it statistics and probability? I think that's an important nuance to understand. I forget who was talking, if it was Ud or Kamui, but I think both of you did a really good job of addressing the points that Sage brought up and providing clarification to some pretty heady topics over the course of the debate. Obviously, I think there's a certain point at which things took a turn for the more lighthearted, let's say, and it was more focused on that aspect. But especially up until that point, I think that you guys did a really good job with the back and forth, and with like, it's one of the more entertaining debates that I've heard in recent times, because of both the creativity of the arguments, but also the fact that you're able to kind of identify those pitfalls, those logic loops or whatever, and be like, no, this is why this doesn't work, this is why this nuance has to be considered, etc. We need more of this shit in the community in general. So thank you for that. It was really an entertaining listen. Yeah, no worries. Really glad to see you guys continuing to make stuff. I'm very curious about what this is all about. I haven't gotten through this the VOD yet, but I hope you guys are doing okay. But yeah, shout out to the walkie-talkie guys for sure. Dr. Strangle says page 164, the other part of that double page spread says Hashirama is known as the strongest ninja. Oh, okay, so there, yeah, I think you mentioned that was a longer spread. So if that's the case, walkie-talkie says we have way more to go over with Sage on this topic. Well, just gotta schedule it. I will be there. I will be, very eager to hear what comes out of it for sure. I think, despite the fact that you guys obviously disagree, it seems like you're able to keep a good rapport as well, and like have a productive conversation, which is nice to see. So regardless, I will be eager to see what comes out of that for sure. Let me see if I can find this real quick because I want to see what Narutoversity has to say about it as well. So 71. Getting a little closer here, I think, right? So 84. So it might be in the jutsu files, right? It's great that they actually have the scans of the actual pages because we can see how far along we are. 106, 108. I actually have my copy of the fourth data book somewhere behind me, but it's in Japanese, obviously. Character files part 2, right? This was part 1. Okay, and part 2. Okay, so let's see. Let's go a little longer. See if we can find this. 118. So is it 160 something? $150. Okay, so we're coming right up on it. 156. 160. Senju Hashirama. Okay, I fucking should have just searched for his name. What the fuck? But yeah, so let's see. Let's just start off by reading this, right? First reincarnation into the world of impurity. His last reincarnation into the world of impurity was imprecise. Hashirama wasn't able to exhibit his true power. Never entrusting his dream to a distant future, Hashirama, the famed ninja god, had a dream that one day a world where young ninjas could live peacefully would come about. Overcoming the piles of victims and corpses, Hashirama founds a village of ninjas for the first time, but the prize of his eye was much farther in the future. A day when ninjas unified, helping each other and cooperating regardless of nation. Although he knew it wouldn't be achieved during the age in which he lived, his unshakable, burning, fiery will was inherited from parent to child to grandchild, and now reborn into the world, he attempts to bring it to fruition. He normally has a warm personality, but if he gets serious, he can subdue the surroundings with only the sharp look in his eyes. Oh yeah, I think I mentioned that in the data book analysis thing somewhere in here. But yeah, let's go back. Let's see. Hashirama was the one leader, Hokage, the history of the village. Okay. Wood release ninjutsu. The power that caused Hashirama to be called the strongest ninja was called wood release. Okay, so yeah, that's important context over there, right? The power that caused Hashirama to be called the strongest ninjas was called wood release. So this seems to provide context for the claim itself, or for the nature of his power being specifically related to wood release. So first of all, he's referred to as the strongest ninja by presumably someone within the Naruto universe from their perspective. Their perspective may indeed be correct, and he may indeed be the strongest, but sometimes when phrasing like this is used, it is more referring to the legend surrounding a character as opposed to an objective calc or measurement. So I think the phrasing here, obviously pending like translation verification or whatever, the phrasing here is important to include for context. There are bloodline limitations to earth release and water release, simultaneously activating the chakra's fundamental abilities. But among the Senju clan, it is a unique secret ability only Hashirama is able to use. Well, this is not entirely true because Yamato can use it, and then later on Madara can use it. This ability can even silence tailed beasts, so it's important to note that it does seem to have like a hard counter specifically to Biju, right? And that's going to come up in a second. While continuing 4 red yang formation and gate of the great god arts, 6 wooden other selves appear. Chakra reserves no bottom. I think it's important also to keep this in context, right? Like we would probably not want to interpret this phrase as being literal in that Hashirama can put infinite amounts of chakra into any of his jutsu because he has an infinite chakra reserve. Like when he's within the 4 red yang formation, whatever, he's only able to produce like I think 4 or 5 clones. He calls that out specifically. Tobirama also is like pissed off at himself that he can only produce 2 clones within the barrier. And I think there's a misconception about Edo Tensei and how it works, that because the phrase infinite chakra is used, that means that any character can put an infinite amount of energy into any given attack. That's not how that works. It like any given attack that is used by an Edo Tensei character has a certain amount of chakra that is required, and the character can mold and control and utilize a maximum amount of chakra that's determined by their skills and abilities. And then once they expend that chakra, it will regenerate indefinitely. In other words, they have regenerating stamina and their stamina will continue to regenerate over and over again, so that they will effectively have infinite chakra because they can keep on molding more and more and more chakra. But it's not like they have the ability to have any given ability scale infinitely. Now, I think most of us understand that, but I did recently hear some confusion about that, so... So, in addition to the rare wood release ninja art, Hashirama masters sage art, which raised the bar for all ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. I think what this is referring to is the fact that, like Pa says about Naruto Sage Mode, that all of your jutsu increase in efficacy, strength, whatever, when you enter Sage Mode. It's normally extremely difficult to exercise chakras for Sage sorcery in battle. Hashirama has the ability to instantly enter Sage Mode. Madara's eternal rival from previous incarnations. Okay, so here we go, right? Further worthy of admiration is his recovery ability, commanding high-level ninja, healing arts. He can heal wounds even without making hand gestures, his body itself brimming with vitality. Those with Hashirama's cells have heightened healing ability. To this day, there is no ninja existing who surpasses this power. So what's interesting to me about that is that this power that isn't surpassed is referring to the healing. Now, it's weird to me to think that, like, the healing ability would be being equated across the board with, like, all other shinobi's abilities wholesale. Like, how do you quantify the power of Hashirama's healing against, like, Madara's Gudodama, for example, or even, like, she doesn't really count as a shinobi, but let's say that Madara could make a Gudodama on the size of, like a massive, expensive truth-seeking orb like Kaguya can do, right? That doesn't really seem to be it's sort of like an apples and oranges comparison there between the power to heal and the power to destroy. It seems more likely to me that this is referring to no other ninja having achieved Hashirama's level of healing power, if that makes sense. When Tsunade shows up on the battlefield, she has exceptional healing, but then Madara says something to her along the lines of, oh, you think that's impressive? You're still nowhere near as good as Hashirama. Obviously, she's not as physically strong as Hashirama, but he's specifically saying your healing jutsu is paltry compared to his. He, in terms of his ability to heal specifically, is also, like, far beyond you, right? So I think that's a way to look at that. But let's continue. Hashirama's sought-after cells in Madara and Orochimaru. Hashirama's artificial body of Madara's creation. The unparalleled recovery ability of Hashirama's body could even exhibit that ability in the bodies of others. Okay, so again, unparalleled recovery ability. Madara lived on by transplanting into a wound Hashirama's cells that he obtained in the Battle of the Valley of the End. In addition, by using the demonic statue as a catalyst, he cultivated living cells to create an artificial body of Hashirama. Even the critically wounded Obito healed his injuries by transplanting half of an artificial body. Hashirama's face appears wherever his cells have been implanted. The cells are alive, but they have no awareness. And then this is where we get the sage's statement, right? For Orochimaru, who had an insatiable desire for immortality, Hashirama's regenerative abilities were a critical target of research. In order to make the power hidden in the cells his, he repeated experiments and misused them for the development of forbidden arts. Yamato, the founder's clone, was an unfortunate byproduct of this. That unrivaled characteristic was one of the substantiating factors for Hashirama being the strongest ninja. Okay, so granted, this translation is what gets used by, like, Naruto Versity gets used by a lot of people in the community. It is often accepted at face value. It is often not. Given translations may be accurate or they might not be, and it is totally fine to be skeptical of this translation and to want to have a second opinion or even a third or fourth opinion. When I did the video on Kirin, that's what I did. Like, I asked both human translators and AI translators to weigh in and share their thoughts. So I think getting alternate views of this is totally fine. Based on what I am seeing right now, this translator decided to translate it as that unrivaled characteristic, the characteristic being the regenerative ability, the power of the cells, right, was one of the substantiating factors for Hashirama being the strongest ninja. So the way that I read this is that the premise that Hashirama is the strongest ninja in order to substantiate that premise, in order to satisfy the burden of proof, if you were to make that a hypothesis, there would be pieces of evidence that could support it. And one of the pieces of evidence is this, right? Like if you are in court and you're arguing for Hashirama being the strongest, one of the things you would put forward is you would say, oh, by the way, he has these cells that give him like these regenerative abilities and they're super rare and you can like build into like half new bodies out of them and heal people from mortal wounds with them, right? That doesn't necessarily correlate directly to his AP or DC as an example. Obviously, it will vastly increase his efficacy in combat if he can just keep on healing himself as an opponent like tries to attack him. He might just be able to outlast opponents that might have been able to defeat him if he didn't have this ability. It is a part of his overall skill set, right? But this in and of itself, to me, is basically saying like this is one aspect of his power, and it's like one argument in favor of him being the strongest. But that leads to the question, well, are there other substantiating factors that would present arguments against him being the strongest shinobi? If so, what are those arguments? How much weight do they hold? If you compare them to this, is this statement in and of itself enough to unilaterally declare, like out of context, without any further elaboration, that Hashirama is the strongest? I don't think so. Especially given that like there's a mixture of different statements in here about Hashirama's powers and the source of his power. There's also a mixture of literal language and hyperbole and inaccurate language, figurative language. I think that it would behoove us to look through Hashirama's data, namely his actual feats in combat throughout the series, and see how this one piece of evidence fits into his overall status as a ninja, right? And especially since in the jutsu entries, right, we had this statement about Madara being the strongest ninja of all, which is something that Sage points out and discusses with Walkie Talkie. But like this statement here is evidence that Madara is the strongest ninja of all, which is a piece of evidence against Hashirama being the strongest ninja of all. So if we take the approach of just taking one of these statements out of context, assuming it's true, and then letting that color our perception of the whole discussion, we could do that for either of these things and wind up biasing the conversation in favor of one of these characters before we even see what they do. And really, like, if there's one key message, one take-home message that I can share with y'all tonight, that is it, right? Like, I'm not really out to convince anybody that Hashirama is or isn't the strongest per se. What I'm advocating for, though, is that, like, we really have to be careful about starting off a conversation with a singular statement that then quote-unquote establishes a precedent and sets a foundation, and then the rest of the conversation has to adhere to that. I think that's putting the cart before the horse. I think what we should do is consider that as one piece of evidence in the overall tapestry of what happens, go to the series, examine it closely, and then see how it all fits together. This one piece of evidence, okay, it's a single piece of evidence. How does that fit into the overall collection of evidence when we put everything together? Hopefully that seems fair. Let me read chat real quick. Walkie Talkie says, sounds good. Dr. Strangle says, gambler's fallacy is a myth created by Big Casino to stop you before they have to give you the win that is statistically getting closer. Boundless chakra. Yeah, that'll make sense. Want to avoid sunk cost fallacy with our arguments as well, right? How about No says, oh yeah, that's the translation of that phrase, right? His power is so great that it can even silence tailed beasts. Has nothing to do with some sort of hard counter, just that it's one of the few things strong enough to do it. Right, I think I was jumping the gun a little bit. When we see the way that Hashirama, like, takes care of Kurama in the series itself, I think that it's, sorry, 1 second. My interpretation of it is that, like, that something about the wood style has a specific way to counter or manage or restrain Biju Chakra specifically, and I think that plays directly into Yamato's suppression of Naruto's like four-tailed, three-tailed partial transformations and stuff like that, right? When Kurama's chakra is leaking out. I don't think that the fact that Yamato can suppress Kurama's chakra with wood style means that Yamato, like, without wood style, would be able to scrap pound for pound with Naruto in 3 or 4 Tails mode, right? Like, I don't think he like essentially scales to Orochimaru, for lack of a more precise phrase. Um, but I think the wood style does basically knock Kurama's chakra out and makes it like a non-factor in the fight. So it's almost like a hack in terms of power scaling. It's like this character has the ability to shut off the ability of another character before it even becomes a factor in like the normal power scaling clashing, if that makes sense. Saria says Hashirama's wood is like Shirsu toxin for tailed beasts. Oh yeah, that shit wouldn't work on me though. My somnophobia would overpower that bullshit. I bet so. So you have like an anti-hack that lets you like out-hack the hack, I guess. It's like Inner Sakura being able to break free of Ino's mind control. Barry Nice says Saria scales above Kurama. Confirm them. Write that down. Yeah, 100%. You heard it here first, folks. I'm gonna stand behind that for sure. How about No says there's certainly enough evidence to suggest he was the strongest ninja at the point in time being described, going from that to of all time, even counting things that happen way after this. However, yeah, it's like saying that because that statement exists in the data book that he's stronger than Jubito and stronger than Jubidara and stronger than Naruto and Sasuke, like that doesn't work, right? Spitfire says Yamato surpassed Kismet's chakra on Turtle Island. Kisame. I was like, who's Kismet? Kisame. Yeah. So I think that he just something about wood style just has the ability to suppress chakra like that, but I don't know if that necessarily correlates directly to AP in the traditional sense. Like he might not necessarily. So like, well, I don't know. We would have to take a look at it, right? But like, if Hashirama can put Kurama to sleep in a way that's kind of analogous to a genjutsu in a vague sense with wood style, that doesn't necessarily mean that like he could walk up to Kurama and punch him in the face and knock him out, right? With another ability. It's that the wood it's not the wood style is not physically overpowering Kurama in like some sort of a chakra wrestling match so much as it is putting him to sleep and lulling him into a pacified state, if that makes sense. It's like tranquilizing him. That's how I read it, but we'll have to see how it works out when we actually see it in context. You're just being skeptical. Well, yeah. Well, the only thing I disagree with you is that there is the just. I am being skeptical, but I don't think the just is the is a defeater per se. Saria says Hashirama looks like the kind of guy who'd wear a coat. Why does that imagery, why do you associate that imagery with Hashirama? That is such a vivid, like, I know exactly what you mean, actually. It's so perfect. Just the kind of guy who always wears two at all times, and then when it comes time to do the act, he takes one of them off so that he's like he's like Lee. He's been stamina training. That's more of a Lee thing, actually. He would. Wow, this conversation took a turn. Anyway, you have a way of like finding my weak spots for comedy. Let's see. So, yeah, basically what I want to do is I want to just go through some feats and some context for Hashirama. I have some notes over here that I'm going to pull up on my other screen, and I think in 619. So again, like I don't want us to come to any conclusions specifically just yet. I really just want to try to accumulate data and like put it in our little pouch, so to speak. And then afterwards we'll empty out the pouch and we'll sort through all the stuff that we've learned and see where that takes us, right? So I do think that there's something in here where Tobirama says something along. This is 619, chapter 619. By the way, this is on Weeb Central. Tobirama says something here about like Madara's will has been smoldering. Madara to emerge could be dealt with right away. This actually probably isn't all that important, but I just want to see if I can find this. Uchiha suppressed and seal it away. Once initial love. Okay, yeah. So just start to put things together, right? So Tobirama refers to the Uchiha power that is associated with experiencing strong love. And the way he describes it is that the Uchiha awaken a profound love and power that exceeds even the Senjus. Now, you could interpret that as being like overall, the Uchiha have greater potential than the Senju do. Um, if they unlock that like love stat boost, so to speak. Another way of interpreting this, which I won't like die on this hill. I'm just saying that I could hear somebody taking this approach, would be to say something like, okay, any given Senju, like the maximum power Senju versus the maximum power Uchiha, the Uchiha, because they're then going to get that love boost, has the potential to outstrip the Senju in power. Right. Again, I don't think we come to any definitive conclusions based on this, but I could see somebody looking at this and being like, okay, well, this means that like Tobirama himself, a Senju, is saying that like within the Uchiha clan is the power to supersede the Senju. So one of the Senju could be stronger than, one of the Uchiha could be stronger than the Senju, right? Let's see. When an individual Uchiha eyes that reflect the heart. So I wanted to see if I could find this one thing about Madara. Yeah, okay. So then a little further down the page, he says, the deeper the darkness gets, the greater the ocular powers also become until the person can no longer be stopped, just like Madara. So I'm pretty sure that, and we can confirm this, that at this point in the series, the characters have not yet become aware of the ongoing war. Is that the case? Yeah, okay. So when Tobirama says that, he's not talking about Madara currently, because he hasn't sensed Madara yet. He hasn't tried to detect him. He doesn't know that the war is going on. So he must be talking about his perception of Madara from the previous age, in which case he has just described Madara as not being capable of being stopped. Now, obviously that's not true because Hashirama did stop him, but Tobirama just said that Madara is unstoppable, and also that because of the love bonus or whatever, that the Uchiha are stronger than the Senju with that love bonus. Now again, this is just Tobirama spouting off, right? It's not discrete power scaling stuff, but it does start to paint a picture of like Madara being at a supremely high level to be acknowledged this way by a Senju, right? And somebody who would obviously know him pretty damn well based on their clashes in the past. So, again, there's nothing definitive to take out of here, but it's just starting to set the stage, right? So now, let's look at the first clash between Hashirama and Madara. So we see them both clashing with physical weapons. Okay, they push off of each other. Madara lands on Kurama, and Hashirama lands on his wood dragon or deep forest emergence or whatever. Keep in mind that Kurama has the Sharingan pattern in his eyes. So Madara is specifically like controlling Kurama. I don't think we see it explicitly, but it does look like he summoned Kurama. So Kurama is under his like an extension of his power, essentially, right? Like Madara himself uses Kuchiyose to bring Kurama to the battlefield. He summons him. He uses his chakra to do that, and then he also puts Kurama under a genjutsu and is controlling him with that. Now, I don't think it means he's controlling him like puppet strings or whatever, but he is clearly expending some sort of chakra and influence to get Kurama to do what he wants. Kurama makes it very clear that he doesn't want to be, like, he hates the way that he feels when Madara tries to control him. Like, when Madara first shows up at the battlefield and he tries to summon Kurama, Kurama's like, absolutely fuck that. Part of the reason why he decides to ally with Naruto and, like, opens up to him is he's like, and this comes up in fucking, something similar comes up in Road to Ninja, too. But anyway, he's like, I don't like you, kid, but I definitely hate Madara, and I do not want to risk being controlled by him again. So I would much rather team up with you, right? So just keeping that in mind. The Susanoo and the Ninetales both clash together with the Wood Golem. Obviously, like, it's pretty impressive that he catches the fucking Ninetales Biju Bomb and just like holds it and then punches back with it. It's pretty fucking cool. Please ignore the images at the bottom of the page. Big explosion. So Madara puts his Susanoo over Kurama. So now he's like quote unquote protecting Kurama or reinforcing Kurama with his own jutsu. The first line of defense on any incoming attack is going to be the Susanoo. I think it's called Majestic Attire, whatever the term for it is, right? The Susanoo coating. And then it like Hashirama has to get through the coating to get to Kurama, right? So they continue to clash. Hashirama is obviously capable of reading the incoming sword swings, parrying them, grabbing them, grabs Kurama in a slightly in his own version of 10,000 Years of Pain, whatever it's called, Sennen Goroshi. And then there's this, what I was talking about before, this feat of like Madara not even physically touching and slicing the mountains apart, but like just the shockwave, the wind blast essentially from him slicing through his sword with like apparently one, Link Legend of Zelda style like charge spin attack. He manages to cut through all of these as well as the mountains in the background. Hashirama has enough presence of mind to be able to manage to run away from this. He summons the Rashomon gates to deflect the attack. I wouldn't read too deep into that. You might argue that, like, okay, this means that he doesn't think he can tank it, but whatever. He decides to summon the Rashomon gates to deflect it. It's whatever, not a big deal. So he says he doesn't want to have to kill you. Some people will look at this and be like, well, this means that any anti-feat to Hashirama after this point is irrelevant because he was holding back. I would maybe dispute that by going back and looking at the Kakashi Bell test, back in part 1 where he says to, Sasuke and Naruto, you guys have to come at me like you intend to kill. Actually, let's look at that briefly because I think it does add like context for this whole thing. So something that can be pretty annoying when dealing with power scaling debates, and it's not totally unfair, like it's understandable wanting to bring this up, but you'll have a character who has a demonstrable anti-feat, like something where they lose in some regard, on some aspect, to another character, and then somebody will say, well, the character who had the anti-feat was holding back, so it doesn't count. And they use the fact that like there is some qualifying mitigating factor about the character's intention to kill that means that you should disregard this anti-feat because they weren't really trying. But all the way back in part 1, like when Naruto starts to go after Kakashi specifically is like, you have to attack as though you mean to kill or you'll never stand a chance. Then the next thing Naruto does is he dashes at him like this, and then he says, at least you struck to kill, so it seems you've begun to respect me. So right away from chapter 4, and I could look for more evidence to support this too, but I think the series in general gives us an understanding that characters can actually strike with full force and a full intention to kill, even if they don't want to kill, because they understand that like unless they go all out, they're never going to have a chance whatsoever. So the desire to kill and the action of killing intent are two separate things. Now, it seems like Hashirama kind of agrees with this because after this, he says, I don't want to kill you. And Madara says, actually, fuck off. Like, literally verbatim on the page says, go fuck yourself, go piss up a flagpole. And this, it's literally written on the panel. And so Hashirama says, then so be it. Then he pulls out Sage Mode, he powers up, and then he starts to come at him, right? So he comes at him with this massive fucking giant Buddha. It looks like, I think Sage pointed this out, right? It looks like the wood golem that he was fighting with before is actually sitting on top of the Buddha itself. So this thing is like, and this is one of the mountains, right? This thing is fucking huge. It's incredibly massive. This is Kurama in the perfect Susanoo compared to the Kanon. So, this in and of itself, just creating this at all is pretty impressive, right? Pulling out Sage Mode. I think it's arguable and probable that Hashirama is going all out here and actually trying to kill Madara, right? That being said, there's not much to glean from their story over here in terms of power scaling. They are presented kind of back and forth as rivals throughout their youth, but obviously we're a little bit more focused on their feats and relativity as adults. So let's just keep going and see where this leads, right? Skip ahead a little bit. Not that this is unimportant. I think it's worth reviewing for sure, but just to stay a little bit focused on the topic. Let's keep going to, what is this chapter? Chapter 624. So, yeah, so we have this panel, right, where, like, I think this is Hashirama, this is Madara, certainly over here. They're over here. Madara completely decides to erase his friend, to erase me from his life. After that, we battled, we fought each other day after day. So I think there's a temptation here to potentially say, like, Hashirama and Madara fought each other one-on-one every single day, and therefore they were rivals, and therefore they were relative consistently throughout the series. They are definitely clashing directly with each other at various points throughout the series. That being said, there are also a lot of other ninja around. I mean, obviously, there are more so in this panel than there are in this panel, but I think it's a little bit difficult to come to the conclusion that they are necessarily only ever interfering with each other, and they don't ever, like, spend chakra trying to support their teammates, or, like, get distracted or have to deal with other bullshit, from other combatants on the battlefield. I think the implication narratively is that they are rivals for each other, and especially since they become the leaders of each other's respective rival clans, that's reinforced by that part of the narrative as well. But if you're getting really precise and specific for power scaling specifically, I think you could argue that there are unknown variables about, like, how much interference each character is getting from other people on the battlefield. So just something to consider. So that being said, in this scene, Tobirama kills is it Izuno? And we do get this statement that from Hashirama that apparently fucking Madara cannot win against him. It might be tempting to look at this and be like, okay, so categorically, right, like, Madara cannot win, so Hashirama is stronger than him. But I mean, look at what happens. Tobirama winds up effectively killing, like, mortally wounding his brother, and then Madara is, like, defending against his, like defending his brother, like, supporting his brother, and then, like, he's facing off against Hashirama and Tobirama. So, like, is the implication here literally that Madara can't, under any circumstances, beat Hashirama in a one-on-one? Or is it that he has overall lost this battle? Like, when Hashirama is referring to winning against me, is he more kind of referring to him as the leader of the clan and everything that represents? It seems like there's a more complex fight with more variables, more characters being involved here. I wouldn't look at this and necessarily say that this means that Hashirama is over Madara explicitly, right? Or vice versa. I think there's just a lot of complex shit going on here. Let me check on chat real quick. Hashirama looks at the... Oh, yeah. Sorry, it says, Uchihas and their big-ass collars. Maybe that's why Tobirama wanted to keep an eye on them and make them police. Almost everyone with a big collar in this universe is an evil lunatic. Yeah, no kidding. Except, I think, like... there's some kind of odd exceptions. Like, Hinata winds up wearing her, like, headband as a big-ass collar, like, around her neck. But obviously, like, she's one of the most, like, timid and kind and, like, gentle souls in the shinobi world, to the point where early on it's called out, like, whether or not she should even be a shinobi in the first place, right? But Dr. Strangle says, very much the vibe of the strongest Pokemon I could win against in a fight is a Mr. Mime, not because I'm particularly strong, but because I saw Mr. Mime in real life. Because if I saw Mr. Mime in real life, ... Was there another... Did that thought get cut off or something? I think I might have missed a message from you, sorry. But yeah, I mean, those things are fucking terrifying, so I think pretty much anybody would run if they saw one of those in real life. Sorry, I said Mr. Mime gave me nightmares as a kid, and then 14-year-old me saw Mimikyu and said, aw, and he's been a staple on my team since. That's really cute, actually. One thing that I want to write that down. I've been meaning to see Detective Pikachu, so I'm going to take 20 seconds to write this down because I keep forgetting. Okay, sorry. Oh, hey, Worm, how's it going? Good to see you. Your name has changed, right? It used to be different. I like Proto Worm. That sounds really cool. My Sunday is going great. I hope you're doing well, too. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out. How About No says, yeah, it's easier to see in the games and anime. The original Buddha is on top of the new one. Yeah, I think that goes to just, like, emphasize the scale and scope of this thing. Really fucking cool. when you the Buddha's absurdly large, says Worm. When you eyeball the size, it's probably bigger than any other construct we see in the series. That makes sense. I think I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, it's like dwarfing Kurama, pretty explicitly. Protoworm says even Jiraiya and Bunta's Toad Flame Bombs is bigger than Madara and Kurama's MAS, but it was like 5 times smaller than the Buddha or something off eyeballing it. Yeah, it really is like extremely imposing and threatening. It's like towering over the mountains, like completely dwarfing them. Um, oh, we still haven't finished Superman, but mostly just because we both got a really random like nostalgia craving for Lord of the Rings, and we started on that. We are gonna finish Superman though. I want to see what happens in it. Um, oh, you changed it, yeah. I was in TG's stream and characters and chatters in TG started calling me cringe, and I was like, bro, yeah, no, I could see why that would get annoying. You're definitely not cringe from my experience. So yeah, Proto Worm just sounds like really cool. It sounds like something out of like an experimental Magic the Gathering expansion set or something. It's really cool. Dr. Sang says my second message might have been TOS. Oh yeah, sorry. I don't even see it on the I just checked the streamer bot chat as well, and I'm not seeing it. So I don't mean to like, just so you know, I don't really have any control over that. I didn't get a message for like moderation or anything. So if for whatever reason anything doesn't get through, obviously feel free to hit me up on Discord afterwards. Yeah, so they wind up clashing again. At this point, Madara has gotten the EMS. They fight. They have a battle that lasts the whole day, and here it says Madara's back touched the ground for the very first time. So I think it would be reasonable to look at this and be like, Madara and Hashirama fought each other over the course of the day, and at the end of the day, Hashirama happened to beat out Madara. That would be totally fine. If you are a casual reader or you're just a random person reading the series and you come to that conclusion, I don't really have a problem with that. Now I am going to become douchebag, overly skeptic, power scaling man. Here I am. Now I am going to do that. Notice how there are other shinobi on the battlefield, including Tobirama and all these other guys, and Madara's clan has basically like given up on him now and like defected to Hashirama's side. So it may be the case that Hashirama had some assistance here, especially since Tobirama is the person who comes forward and is the one who's like about to kill Madara, and it looks like he's kind of scuffed up and sweaty and dirty. It seems like he was probably fighting. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this proves that Madara is over Hashirama, or that Hashirama is over Madara at this point in the series. I would also not say necessarily that this means that Hashirama had to get help to beat Madara. I think that at the end of the day, narratively and in terms of their ideology and stuff like that, they are framed as rivals and pretty much equals overall. And it does happen to be the case that Madara loses here, and a big part of why he loses is because of his stubbornness and his unwillingness to like rescind his values or his like his rage after losing Izuna and stuff like that, right? And if he had people with him, he might have done better and taken more Senju casualties. I think especially, yeah, like looking at the scuffing at his armor and stuff like that, I do think that Tobirama at least was probably involved in this fight as well. Does that mean that Hashirama is stronger than Madara or vice versa? Not necessarily. It's just more data for us to look at, right? So then they have this like sacrifice, show me your guts type of thing. Really touching moment, actually. Really cool moment. But then for our power scaling purposes, of course, we're going to douchily skip over, the actual character building and the sweet moments and the heartfelt conversations and go back to like the nitpicky argumentation. We do have this statement from Madara that like Hashirama knows that nobody can take him from behind, and Hashirama does seem to agree with that. But then again, this winds up getting proven false later, kinda. So I think, again, the temptation, if you're quote mining, if you're just like kind of trawling for bits of data to use in arguments, you might be tempted to look at this and say like, okay, well, Madara is explicitly telling Hashirama that he can't catch up to him, and then Hashirama doesn't say anything to negate it, so you know, but I don't know if that's like something that's strong enough that you can use in an argument or whatever. I'm just pointing it out as something that comes up. Okay, so now we're, just for clarification, we are on chapter 626. We have a continued clash between Hashirama and Madara. You know, they're going back at it. We're picking up where we left off with the Buddha and, um, the artifacts of the Buddha and the thousand armed Kyanon or however you pronounce that, right? Um, so interestingly here, it looks like the Buddha statue actually detaches from the arms. Like Madara manages to um, slice through enough of the arms as they're extending towards him that it seems to basically render all these arms ineffective. Like he clashes successfully with them to the point where the Buddha statue itself then detaches from the arm and moves forward. But the price of that exchange is that the Susanoo armor has been stripped um, off of Kurama, at least partially. So to me, this is about an equivalent exchange. Like the Susanoo that is armor like on top of Kurama is enough to like the combined power of Kurama under Madara's Genjutsu plus the Susanoo on top of him is enough to clash with the Buddha. Um, it does also look like Hashirama is tired here. Like he has Sage Mode on, so he's like bringing in natural energy, which should be increasing his like recovery time and overall energy pools. Despite that fact, he is breathing heavily. He's panting, right? So this is taking something out of him. He Now that he's managed to strip the Susanoo armor off, he grabs Kurama, and then he uses this ability, Kakuan's 10th Edict on Enlightenment, where he has this symbol in his hand, and this is pretty much exactly what gets used on um, Naruto as well. I don't know if it gets called up with the same name, but I do think there's a symbol on Yamato's hand, and he specifically like holds his wrist with one hand and like puts his hand out when he suppresses Naruto's chakra. And then we can see that like it's coming out through the wood golem. It has the same like character on it. Madara sees this coming and dashes out of the way. And this is actually pretty interesting here to me, is that in this moment it looks like Madara rescinds control over Kurama, right? So now Kurama does not any longer have Madara's influence, like the whatchamacallit, on his eyes. It's just Kurama versus Hashirama at this point. But what happens here, like Kurama stops fighting, right? He stops struggling. He's no longer thrashing around and clawing. He's no longer firing off Biju bombs. He just closes his eyes and he goes to sleep. So, yes, there is a feat here that the Buddha manages to grab and hold and restrain Kurama. I don't know how impressive that is on its own, because like Gamabunto was also able to pin Kurama down for a little while. It's still impressive. It's still Kurama, but this is not like the most impressive strength feat to me when we start scaling into late war arc. But despite that fact, it looks like it's enough to at least give Madara like reason to break the Sharingan connection, and then Kurama winds up kind of getting put to sleep. So there's kind of a lot going on here, right? There's kind of a lot of things that happen really quickly, but I think my interpretation of this is that although Kurama is temporarily restrained by the golem, it's not a straight up clash of strength that winds up winning between the golem and Kurama. It's this soporific sleepy effect, right? That winds up winning. So Madara and Hashirama now, they both like get rid of their large summons. Hashirama no longer has access to the wood golem and seems a bit tired. Madara no longer has access to Kurama, and so they're fighting like more directly. Some time elapses, and this is a pretty interesting detail, right? They are both tired, they're both exhausted. Madara has lost his external like armor plating at this point, so whether he shed that himself or whether Hashirama took it off, it's still impressive. But compare that to what Hashirama looks like. Hashirama's whole arm is like burnt up. His armor and his shirt have been stripped off, and his Sage Mode has been depleted. It's like gone, right? So Madara has managed to stay on par with him, even if Hashirama's holding back a little or whatever. Like, he's managed to be effective enough against him throughout this whole fight to get him to the point where he has injured his arm, despite Hashirama's healing, despite Sage Mode and all that. He's managed to get through it, and also like to chip his armor and to tear his clothing. And from the outside, looks to be doing better than him, although, appearances can be deceiving. So Madara dashes forward towards Hashirama. Hashirama clashes with him in the middle, and it looks initially like Madara won. He's the one still standing. It's the opposite of last time, etc. But then, of course, we know that that doesn't quite work out because Hashirama comes in from behind Madara and stabs him from behind. So I think the temptation here is to say that Hashirama is over Madara because Hashirama beats Madara. But something to keep in mind here is that Hashirama had a chance to clash directly with Madara head on, right? They had a chance to do the Naruto and Sasuke thing where they both dashed at each other and they both like extended they did like the Rasengan Chidori clash or whatever, and finish it in a straight up confrontation. Hashirama doesn't do that. The decision that he makes is specifically to make a clone, which clearly Madara is not expecting. Like, he's clearly shocked that Hashirama would even like consider doing something like this. It's like out of character for him to do so. It's also just kind of shocking to Madara that he, with that amount of confidence, like, that anybody could come up from behind him. He wouldn't have expected Hashirama to do that in character. He does it anyway. He uses a wood clone to create a diversion and attack Madara from behind, right? So, and even Madara acknowledges this by saying, "You've changed, Hashirama," right? Like, now it looks like Hashirama objectively wins. Madara is defeated. He's, like, out for the count. And Hashirama is still, well, he's not standing, but he's kneeling, like he's doing better than Madara. Thing to remember, though, is that Madara doesn't die here, obviously, right? So Hashirama creates a clone. That clone manages to create a diversion and fool Madara. While Madara is fooled and his back is turned, Hashirama launches a surprise attack and assassinates him from behind. Despite that fact, Madara still manages to produce a clone of himself. That clone is so convincing that it manages to fool Hashirama and, like, expert sensory type Tobirama into thinking that it's actually his real body, and then he just, like, gets away and outlives Hashirama for decades. So, yeah, Hashirama wins, but his victory is secured with deception and a feint, and Madara still manages to cast, like, a shadow clone and escape from the fight and trick Hashirama into thinking that he's dead. So, again, there are some wrinkles here. There's some layers. This fight is the onion, right, of the Naruto verse. And when you peel it away, you realize that there's more nuance to it than just saying, well, this character won, so he's objectively superior to the other. Okay, let me catch up on chat real quick. Saria says, "That's mean. I'm sorry they were doing it." Yeah, that was honestly pretty shitty of them. I'm sorry you were on the receiving end of that. Honestly, you should have kept it the same. Live your best life and vibe. I mean, look at me. I've got a Zelda-themed at with a carry white happy lol. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you should do what you feel reflects your character and is something that you're proud of and excited to share with other people. If they can't deal with that, right, then that's their problem. But also, I can understand, like, not wanting to invite the conflict if people are already being belligerent. So, whatever you do, I hope you make the decision because it's something that you feel cool about, right? I'll definitely support you if you want to stick with Cringeworm or change to Proto. Either way, it's your identity, and, like, that's your own special thing, right? So, let's see. It was a time. Oh, you're saying it was time for you to change anyway. You're tentatively considering trying to make a video, and I like this new handle a bit better in a way. Yeah, that's really cool. I definitely would love to see you make a video. I hope that that you, if you pick a topic that is something that you're interested and passionate about, then yeah, like, we need more cool content in the community. So I hope you'll feel encouraged to do so. Protoworm says, "I recently found a band called the Proto Men." Oh, I think I've heard that name before. Their main work is this Mega Man inspired rock opera that is very cool. So working that in is fun. Yeah, that'd be fucking awesome. Protoworm said, "Maybe you're just wording it differently than I'm expecting, but I feel like your wording is a bit off. Madara had the time delay Izanagi." That's true. I forgot about that, right? He did use the Izanagi as part of his choreography there, right? So it's not like he cast a shadow clone under Hashirama's eyes, and, like, yeah, so I think I was wording it poorly there, right? Like, the way I was describing it is that he managed to cast the shadow clone jutsu while Hashirama was watching him, and, like, evade his detection, where really what he did is he used the Izanagi to bring himself back after the fact and then managed to, like, survive and make a shadow clone at some point after that. So I guess the feat is actually a little bit less impressive for Madara with that context. That's fair to say. Then he put the shadow clone in his tomb and then got out. Yeah, that's totally fair to say. So I think I didn't explain it accurately. I appreciate the clarification there. So let's see. Let's take a look at my notes over here. I think that one thing that I want to mention that I forgot to mention, if we go back to chapter 621 for a second, there is this note from Hashirama, or from Madara, where he says, wood style, wood expulsion jutsu, was it? Perfect for taking on difficult beasts. I mean, obviously this is a little bit vague. This is open to interpretation. But the way that I was, before how I was saying that, like, there's a hard counter to Kurama or whatever, I think I was building that understanding partially off of what Madara is saying here. It seems like it's not just a matter of the, wood style being physically stronger than Kurama and, like, winning in an arm wrestling match or whatever. I think there is something about wood style that is specifically, like, has a property about it that counters Biju. I think it's also mentioned as part of why Hashirama is able to subdue the other Biju as well. It's, like, maybe he could, like, pin them all down and just defeat them with his raw physical strength, but I think that factually what actually happens is that he uses the suppressive chakra restraining properties of wood style to to knock them out, as opposed to it just being an extension of his physical power. Okay, so let's see. I want to jump ahead a little bit to chapter 631. So let's do that. So this is when the Hokage have been resurrected and they are approaching the battlefield. So obviously, like, they're dashing towards the area. Minato shows up first. Hashirama, Tobirama, and Hiruzen show up after the fact. Madara notices Hashirama. They have this, one of my favorite little exchanges in the whole series, like Madara's crestfallen expression over here. So, I want to just look at the context of what happens over the course of this interaction over here, right? So, if we're eventually going to start talking about Hashirama versus Jubito, which we will do, or like Jubito. Ten Tails Jinchuriki Obito. I think it's worth examining how these characters interact with the Ten Tails, right? So, thinking about how Hashirama dealt with the Nine Tails during that fight against Madara, he just kind of, like, tapped Kurama on the head and put him to sleep after restraining him. He doesn't really do that with the Ten Tails, does he? Like, he doesn't run up to it and just, like, smack him on the head and to turn him off. He doesn't, like, pull out the Buddha and just start beating the shit out of him and defeat him with a raw physical strength clash. He does something a bit different, which is that he creates a barrier with the assistance of the other three Kage. He doesn't create the barrier himself. He uses Sage Mode to bring the deity gates down into play and suppress the tails of the Ten Tails, but he also uses the Hokage to help him generate the barrier around it. So again, like, he doesn't run up to it and blitz it and, like, kick the shit out of it. He suppresses it, he restrains it, and he has the assistance of three other Kage to do so. I wouldn't necessarily say that this means that Hashirama couldn't defeat the Ten Tails on his own, and that like proves that Hashirama is below the Ten Tails. But I do think that it is interesting context to note that Hashirama doesn't 1v1 the Ten Tails himself. He gets assistance from multiple other Kage in order to restrain it, and it's still not defeated, right? So, moving on to chapter 632, this is something that is going to come up in, like, the Sage video response and in the debate response and stuff like that, right? If we talk about Wakitaki's debate. So, here is Hashirama, Edo Tensei, obviously, but he's got Sage Mode active, and he summons 5 different wood clones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, you'll notice that Hashirama's, like, main body maintains Sage Mode, whereas the clones themselves don't actually have the like just call it eyeshadow pattern, what like the makeup pattern or whatever it is on his face that indicate that the clones are in Sage Mode too. So now pay attention to what happens here with Hashirama. As he's approaching the battlefield, he specifically says, I'll make entry points on 4 sides of the barrier so shinobi can go in and out, follow me, right? And the me, the I, the individual who is saying these things, is Hashirama himself as an individual, right? You can see that, like, this phrase is being shared by these 4 characters, these 4 clones of Hashirama, to the point where they're actually sharing speech bubbles. So here, Hashirama, as a wood clone, is referring to me and I, and although the clones themselves are speaking, it seems pretty clear to me that they are basically an extension of Hashirama's voice. He's essentially using them like a PA system, or like, like remote speakers or whatever, to talk to other people. He's not saying, hi, I am Hashirama clone 2A, please follow me. I am Hashirama clone XTC 4000, please follow me specifically. He is having the clones, like, basically act as avatars of himself, and he's referring to himself through the clones. That's how I interpret this anyway, especially since they are, like, this phrasing here, I'll make entry points on 4 sides. You could argue that the phrase follow me, like, the individual clone is just referring to himself, like, hey, you guys near me, follow me, this specific clone. But Hashirama himself is having his clone say, I'll make entry points on 4 sides. Obviously, it's not the one clone who's doing that. The 4 clones are sharing that task. Each clone is only making 1 entry. So in other words, despite the fact that the clones are speaking and using first-person pronouns, it's actually Hashirama himself who's talking through the clones. That might seem like a frivolous detail, but it's going to become very important very soon. So Hashirama places another data gate directly on the head of the Ten-Tails, again, like suppressing the Ten-Tails, sends a clone to deal with Madara. Madara says, a doppelganger's no fun, I will wait till the real you shows up, and then this whole clash starts. So, yeah, this is what I was talking about, like, you know, however high you think Sakura scales, use this as a baseline for the amount of, like, AP that can be put into a single punch, and then scale upward from Sakura. I think it was Very Nice who was asking about this, right? Scale upward from Sakura to characters like Kaguya, to figure out, like, how high the AP gets in the series. Thank you for that. Thanks, Weep Central. Appreciate the eye candy to mix things up. So I'm going to jump ahead to chapter 2. Let me read chat real quick. Worm says, actually, John, I think your channel is a bit of an inspiration for the video I want to make. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm really glad to hear that. I want to do a deep fight analysis for a Hunter x Hunter fight that has a lot of questions around it, very much in the vein of what you do for Naruto. That's fucking awesome. Yeah, I fully encourage you to do that. I would love to learn more about the Hunter x Hunter, should I say Hunter x Hunter or Hunter x Hunter? The Hunterverse, regardless. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And yeah, it is like, that's the best compliment that I can receive. It's like, hey, John, I learned something from your stream, or hey, listening to what you said made me want to do something too. That is so fucking cool to hear. And genuinely, I will really appreciate it. No pressure, of course, but I really will appreciate it if you wind up making something, and I could pass things on in a positive way. So I really hope you do. It's just Hunter x Hunter, the X is silent. Okay. I feel like I've heard people say it both ways, but I feel like it's like a shibboleth, and I didn't want to make the mistake of, like, outing myself as not being in the know. So I appreciate you cluing me into the code word, so to speak. Protoworm says, I do feel like Edo Hashirama probably isn't able to create the Buddha when he fights Edo Madara. He goes Sage Golem versus Perfect Susanoo, but I feel like the Buddha would just do better in that scenario. That might be true, yeah. We do know that Edos are weakened to a degree, at least in the case of Hashitobi and Madara. I think the nerf might be in play here. Yeah, so this is a great time to talk about, like, Edo nerfs. 1 second. I think I did a stream on this like a year ago, but I might want to do another one and review it because I think my opinions have changed a little bit. Basically, in debates, in the same way that the like you triggered my character was holding back trap card, another thing that comes up a lot is like X, Y, or Z Edo Tensei character, excuse me, having an anti-feat doesn't count because Edos have an Edo nerf. And like, I think that's probably fine. But I also, so, not that this means that I'm right, not that this is necessarily even a good argument, but just from my perspective, when I read through the series, I didn't get the impression at all that the supposed nerfs that the Edo Tensei were on the receiving end of had any real negligible effect on their overall combat performance, except for the very first time that they were summoned. So, like, uh, Orochimaru's first summoning of Hashirama and Tobirama, obviously they weren't anywhere near their full power and combat efficacy as they were like 500 whatever chapters later. Okay, that's totally fine. But I think Onoki also mentions that fucking uh, the jutsu of Rasa and Mu maybe are just as powerful and fearsome as they were when they were alive. So Tobirama, when he's still being suppressed by Orochimaru, says, "We were brought back at nearly our full power." My personal, not gonna win a debate on this, but my personal view of this is that Edo Tensei basically aren't nerfed in any sort of significant way. Before Tobirama was like fully unleashed and allowed to do whatever he wanted, when he was still under Orochimaru's binding, he wasn't at full power. He wasn't brought back at full power. But then when Orochimaru lets him go, for all intents and purposes, all the characters there are at full power. Even if they have like a 1%, 5%, 10% stat reduction, if you can even argue that, that clearly doesn't apply to all of their jutsu. As long as they can still mold enough chakra to allocate to the jutsu to make it as strong as they could when they were alive, the jutsu themselves aren't necessarily suffering that power loss, as evidenced by Onoki's statements about Rasa and Mu. And moreover, the Edo Tensei itself is a buff. Having infinitely regenerating health is a buff. Having infinitely regenerating stamina is a buff. Being able to use like a ninjutsu indefinitely without ever worrying about either dying or running out of chakra, that's a buff as well. Now, obviously, it's not literally the same as a stats buff. They could still be nerfed in terms of their stats, but then also have this additional layer of enhancement. But I think overall, when you consider the implications of running out of chakra or like sustaining a wound and how no longer having to worry about that affects you, your overall combat efficacy is going to go up dramatically by being an Edo Tensei, even if, like, as long as you are in character and can control your own actions and stuff like that. Even if you are like some imperceptible or unquantifiable amount less strong in terms of your like numerical AP or like jutsu power load, you're still overall stronger, especially if you're like Kimimaro or Itachi, where you had some sort of illness that was affecting you previously. If that goes away, that's obviously like a boon as well. But given that after the characters, the Edo Hokage, go to the battlefield, none of them ever says anything, to my recollection, about, oh shit, I'm an Edo Tensei. If only I were alive, then I would be able to hit harder, but as an Edo Tensei, I'm not able to. None of the characters ever complains about being an Edo and about how that's holding them back. Like, I don't think any character does, except for Madara. The thing about Madara, though, is that when Chiyo is brought back as an Edo Tensei, she's an old lady. When the third Raikage is brought back, he's got the scar on his chest. When Nagato is brought back, he's old. Like, he looks old, he's withered, he's emaciated, his hair is still white, and he can't walk. So you do wind up getting brought back in the overall physical state and with physical limitations and blemishes and stuff. Not necessarily like having a head cold or like ninja gonorrhea or whatever. Like, you know, you come back with the appearance and like gross bodily limitations that you were shackled with, like natural non-illness related or whatever, that you had when you were alive. So remember, when Madara dies, he's an old man on life support attached to a tree. He describes himself as a ghost. He can't really get around much. He can't really do a whole lot much. His combat power is really not all that effective, compared to, in all likelihood, compared to when he was fighting Madara at the fighting Hashirama at the Final Valley. So Kabuto has to do all of this extra work to try to get him to how strong he thinks he was when he was alive. So he gives him the Hashirama cells and like tries to soup him up and does whatever other experimentations he winds up doing. And then Madara also gets EMS, or not EMS, I'm sorry, he gets the Rinnegan as well, which he awakens himself. So when he is an Edo Tensei, it's kind of hard to quantify exactly how much stronger or weaker he is compared to his alive self, because all these different variables have changed about him. Like, he previously didn't have infinitely regenerating stamina and chakra, now he does. He didn't have infinitely regenerating health, he couldn't match Hashirama's healing ability, that's made very clear by the fourth data book, but now he can heal himself indefinitely, so that's not as big of a burden. He has access to chakra absorption via the Rinnegan. He also has Hashirama's cells flowing through him as well, so my personal take on that is that Edo Madara, in quote-unquote base, would not have been as strong as his alive self. Kabuto tried his damnedest to get him back up to speed, but, you know, he had to restore him from his old broken man self back to his youth, back to his prime, and he got as close as he could, but who knows how close he actually got. Like, Madara says to him, like, you know what I was like when I was alive? And Kabuto says, no, I actually don't, so you're gonna have to show me how strong you are, right? He's curious to see how close he got and how well he did. So I think probably, despite the fact that Madara has Hashirama cells and Madara has the Rinnegan, he might be like roughly equivalent to his EMS Valley of the End self. He might be a little bit lower, but I think it's sort of like a weird case where he has these debuffs that are then matched against these buffs that kind of make him just a different character with different strengths and weaknesses. I do look at him almost as like a different character at that point. Like, he's in a different form and he has different scaling as a result. I hope that makes sense. Let me check chat again. So how about No says, note, in the Japanese he says nothing about it being perfect. It devours or takes on the calamity of beasts. Is it the wood-released Bohai technique? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That might just be one of the liberties that is taken with the translation again. I appreciate the context there. Worm says, though, also, I guess you can chalk it up to Hashirama potentially being too fatigued from everything he was doing prior to fighting Madara. Yeah, that makes sense as well. I think Sage brought up the idea that, like, why didn't Hashirama use the deity gates in his fight with Madara? They would have been useful, and therefore he thinks he acquired the deity gates after his fight with Madara. That could be, like, that's possibly the case, but sometimes, you know, it might also just be the case that he didn't think of it, or it didn't seem appropriate, or, like, there's some other quality about the deity gates that made it less useful in that fight that we're not considering. Like, there's always option C, and option C might be an unknown, so it's kind of hard to... I think it's always worth considering that there might be other options worth exploring, but I don't really feel like drawing a line in the sand about that either way. How about No says, that Sakura feat might actually be less impressive than the stuff Jirobo was doing. Oh, really? Okay, that's not going into any Gates user feat. That's fair. I mean, like, I don't know, it seems pretty impressive to me from a narrative standpoint and, like, at an eyeball glance, but yeah, I guess, like, the reason why I'm impressed by it is specifically, like, the size of the Fishin clones, or whatever they're called. Like, they definitely appear to be, larger than your average, well, yeah, okay, I guess they're not that big. No, they're not that, they're about human-sized, okay. For some reason, they were a lot bigger in my head, so yeah. I think this is more impressive than Jirobo, but I see your point. I see your point. Let's see. How about no says Loki? I think it's just the Hokage and Madara that are nerfed because they're that stronger. Yeah. So I this is so fucking confusing because they use the term binding to mean like eight different things, but I think there's basically two components that determine the overall strength and efficacy of a an Edo Tensei summon. The first is what is sometimes referred to as accuracy. So basically, when the soul comes, or precision rather, when the soul is summoned from the Pure Land or whatever and bound to the body, the precision and skill with which the soul is bound to the body determines how much of the soul's strength um, of that person would have had when they were alive gets put into the resurrected body. So that's part one. And like the better the person is at using the Edo Tensei summoning jutsu, and the more precise they are with it, the greater the amount of like base power they're able to bestow on their summon. Then there's binding strength, and that's the ability of the caster to control, restrain, and command the target. And I think both of those things are influenced by the ratio of power of the caster to the target. Orochimaru admits that he won't be able to control Hashirama if Hashirama really wants to get away, so he doesn't have the strength to bind him. Therefore, it's also arguable that maybe he doesn't have the uh, summoning precision to even bring Hashirama back at full strength in the first place. If that's the case, it also probably makes sense that Kabuto um, doesn't have the strength to bring Madara back at full strength anyway, but he's also not summoning Madara back in his prime, right? He summons Madara back as an old ass man, then he modifies him to try to make him younger, and then when Madara gets resurrected, then he gets resurrected back in his prime, in his youth, right? When he was younger. And then he gets like Sage Mode and the Rinnegan on top of that, and then he's like way stronger than he was before, right? Um, Oh, Worm has to go. Say I gotta go now, but enjoy the rest of your J's. John in chat sent the image in the Naruto channel. Yeah, awesome. I hope you do well. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. As always, thank you for stopping by, and good luck with the video. Worm also said, I think the only ones who hit the nerve are probably Hashirama, Tobi, and Madara. Yeah, that might be the case. There's a fun graphic I've seen posted in Sage's server that I can send in yours if you want it. That kind of sums it up. I don't think Minato is even weaker because weaker in base Edo than is a live base. Yeah, let's take a look real quick. 1 second, sorry. If you would please consult the graphs. Yeah, I love this. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's go a little bit longer here. 626, we talked about stripping the Susanoo armor off. Hashirama makes 5 wood clones. Hashirama's gates are holding by the 10 tails. 636 Madara says that Hashirama's concentrate. Oh yeah. So let's see. This is 633, I think. Yeah. So this is a feat for Hashirama, right? Like, let me not slander the man. He himself is the person who is holding down the 10 tails himself with the deity gates, right? Like the 4 flames red fucking formation box thing is creating a perimeter or a barrier around the 10 tails, but the thing that's actually holding it down is Hashirama himself. So with the deity gates, he does have the strength to not only restrain them, but also to like modulate the restrain the 10 tails, but also to modulate the opening and closing of the gates to let other people in, and also like do that via his clones at a distance that is like divvying up his power. So I think, let's not act like Hashirama, what he's doing isn't impressive. He's still peak, like he's still fucking great. I just want us to look at all the data as we approach Jubito, because I think things change once Jubito enters the scene, so to speak. So let's continue just looking at the data. Let's go to 636. There is a statement that I wanted to bring up about how Hashirama is divvying up his power or something like that. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so Madara is fighting against Hashirama's doppelgangers. Madara says, I appreciate the effort, but it's meaningless. You're concentrating too much power in your actual body. So, I mean, I think we should put this into context with how like making clones works in general, but it seems like Hashirama is specifically like keeping most of his power in his main body instead of splitting it up evenly between his clones, which is kind of cool and it makes sense, right? He's sending the clones off as almost like fragments of himself to do his bidding, to keep Madara busy, to help out in various aspects of the battlefield, but the main repository of chakra and strength is always going to be his main body, right? So that's worth noting. Madara notices, of course, that Obito, sorry, falls out of the Kamui dimension, and this whole thing starts. I think it's noticeable that Madara also says, I wanted to fight Hashirama before I became a Jinchuriki, but oh well. So, understanding Madara as a character, he wants to fight Hashirama and beat him on even terms, I think. I think why he's saying this is because he views Hashirama as like the only person who is his equal in the shinobi world, the only one who is his rival. I have to go back and find it, but I think he says something like this when he's fighting the Gokage. He's like, the only person who could ever stop me, the only person who's worthy of me is Hashirama, and he's not here right now, so there's nothing you can do, right? He's like in love with him, like literally. Hashirama is the only person he really cares about, and he wants to fight Hashirama fair and square in an even bout. And I think once he becomes a Ten Tails Jinchuriki, that is going to change, and he's no longer going to be on even footing. To me, like, it's vague, it's open to interpretation, but in context, knowing everything we know about Madara, I think the reason why Madara wants to do this is because once he becomes the Jinchuriki, he's going to miss out on that opportunity to fight him as equals, and it's going to be, you know, an open and shut thing. And this is actually what we see later on. Let's see. Let's go to 637. This is still 636, right? Yeah, okay. So in 637, I've written down that Hashirama says that Madara must not be allowed to return to life. So let's see Hashirama's reaction here. He's obviously got a grim expression on his face. He's doing whatever he's doing, you know, controlling his clones, I suppose, observing what's happening. And then he realized that what Madara is doing is trying to use the Rinne Rebirth Jutsu, and he goes from, yeah, being stern and taking things seriously, to then being like, this is completely fucking unacceptable. Like, this, the realization that Madara is going to come back causes Hashirama to ramp up and get, like, more agitated, which to me implies that it is going, I mean, this should be obvious to anybody who's, like, read through this whole sequence, but, like, Madara is going to get stronger and is going to present more of a threat once he levels up. So if Hashirama is in any way relative to Madara here, if there's any arguments whatsoever to indicate that these two characters are on par with one another right now, that is going to change drastically once Madara revives himself, which is evidenced by the fact that Hashirama is like more concerned and more urgent about needing to prevent that, right? This is the thing about him summoning the limited number of clones inside the barrier, etc. I did want to point out also, it would be kind of convenient if any of these characters could like move at light speed to be able to get to Madara, who's like probably a few hundred feet away. But let's put that aside for now. Regardless, so yeah, chakra gets drained. I don't think there's anything else specifically that I wanted to mention here for the Hashirama stuff. Let me look at my notes. Yeah, so 638 will be the next bit of evidence to review. Yep, there we are. That robot guy. Aw, kind of a sad little anecdote there. Kishimoto's anecdotes are actually very charming. I highly recommend checking them out if you just want to learn more about him as a creator. Okay, yeah, so Hinata with the Byakugan on observes what happens, and just, I mean, I think this is pretty clear, but just in case there's any ambiguity about this, she does specifically say all of Ten Tails was completely absorbed into that man. Again, it's from her perspective. She could be, you know, incorrect, I suppose, but it seems pretty clear that now all of the strength, which once again, remember, Hashirama didn't blitz in one shot and destroy and annihilate or even seal or anything. He suppressed and restrained, but didn't fully defeat the Ten Tails with the help of the other three Hokage, and whoever else was participating on the battlefield, you know, like Sakura dealing with the fission beings and stuff like that. Naruto and Sasuke fighting against them as well. Despite all of that, um, all of that energy has now been brought into Obito, like all of it, completely, entirely, including its chakra. And so now Obito has all that power within him, as well as whatever power he had beforehand. He's a Jinchuriki now. Okay. Um, so Hashirama also like looks super grim and says this is bad. He didn't say this is bad in regards to Madara before. He also didn't say this is bad in regards to the Ten Tails before. He was pretty upbeat and optimistic about fighting with them. Like he took it seriously, obviously, but he was like, "Yeah, let's go. We can do this. Come on, guys!" Right? It's pretty. This is the first time we see him look this stern. Um, and then Naruto and Sasuke kind of elaborate on this a little bit. Um, Hashirama tries to put the deity gates on Obito, and he says that the gracious deity gates are still in play. He dogpiles a shitload of them directly onto Obito's head, directly, but then Obito just shrugs them off. And then we get this super, like, grim expression from Hashirama, right? Even Hiruzen is like such power. The Sage Art Seal that it even suppressed Ten Tails. Okay, so everybody here is agreeing this is grim. This is like serious shit. And fucking, even though it was previously used to suppress the Ten Tails, Jubito just like fucking shrugs it off, literally. Then he just shreds the barrier. And again, like this is a barrier that was created by the 4 Hokage, including Hashirama in Sage mode, and the other 3 Hokage, and Jubito just annihilates it, like casually, right? Rips it to shreds. Doing so pushes back at least 3 of the Kage, including Sage Mode Hashirama. And the shockwave or the force of that is significant enough to cause all of Hashirama's clones, like that are inside the barrier, and Tobirama's clones to all dissipate, right? And so now he's saying, now like Yuki and Killer Bee have this conversation where it's implied that, or it's stated that the power of the Ten Tails was just kind of getting thrown around before, and now it's getting focused within Jubito. And then Jubito gets better and better, kind of like Naruto when he gets like more proficient with KCM2. Jubito is going to get better and better at controlling the Ten Tails chakra, both in terms of like being able to use like the Gudodama style like globs of whatever they are, as well as being able to pull out stuff like the sword of Nunoboko, and also just like retaining his consciousness and like controlling himself. He gets continually stronger beyond this point. So this is like the base entry level Jubito strength, but then that increases. And at base, before he stabilized, before he started to use any of his abilities, really, everybody's already freaking out, right? Now he's kind of lost his sanity. Now, this is where Hashirama himself says, this guy is stronger than me. Now, my assumption is that pretty much anybody who reads this, who's not a Naruto power scaler, is going to look at this and say, okay, Hashirama himself, after just having like this grim ass expression, watching everything that just happened, seeing how strong Jubito is, Hashirama, the character Hashirama, is saying that Jubito is stronger than he is, and that is commensurate with everything that we've seen up to this point. Apparently, though, that's not sufficient or acceptable for power scaling. Apparently, that doesn't pass muster, because we have to consider whether or not Hashirama is actually talking or if it's the clone talking. Since Hashirama himself, like his main body has the fucking sage mode makeup, tattoo, whatever you want to call it, like the markings, right? Just call it the markings. Since he has sage mode markings on his face, then we can tell the difference between his clones and him, because his clones don't have the sage mode markings on his face. So, technically speaking, this is one of his clones, and the clones, which we know are weaker than his main body, are saying, or this clone specifically is saying, he is stronger than me. So what Sage and certain other people in the community have done is taken this and been like, well, this clearly means that it's just the clone who's weaker than Jubito. But before we like debunk that, I want to point out how fucking weird that would actually be if that's what Kishimoto wanted us to understand. This is why I want to say that like only like fucking powers, only absolutely fucking power scalers would ever come to this conclusion, right? Like it's very clear from a narrative standpoint that what is happening here is that a new threat has entered the arena, a new challenger has approached, right? And or has arrived, and this character is really really fucking strong, so strong that he's invalidating the restraints that were placed on the previous like mini boss or whatever. He is changing the landscape of the battle. He's starting a new phase of the battle because of how strong he is. So in order to tell that story and in order to emphasize um, how strong this character is, what do you think makes more sense from a narrative standpoint? What do you think is more dramatically impactful and adds to like the storytelling there? Kishimoto telling us that he is even stronger than the god of shinobi himself, or saying, oh, he happens to be stronger than one of Hashirama's clones that is arbitrarily weaker than Hashirama to some big extent, and we haven't even really seen the clones fight much anyway, so we don't even really know how strong they are. Like, it's completely useless in terms of storytelling for Kishimoto to tell us that Jubito is stronger than a clone, because the strength of that clone has not really been quantified, right? It's not really, the clones themselves don't really have great feats at this point, so there is no narrative weight associated with it being stronger than an arbitrarily scaled down clone. It makes no sense. And this is why I say, again, only a fucking, with a capital F, power scaler would ever come up with this interpretation, specifically because it could help them win an argument, specifically because it could help them clear a point, specifically because it could potentially be a debunk to, like a preemptive debunk to a counterpoint. I think it would be very very weird for a casual reader who was not looking for fodder for argumentation, like whatchamacallit, like specific quotes to mind to make part of an argument, to ever come to the conclusion that, oh no, it's actually not that impressive, it's just like he's stronger than the clone, but who cares. Regardless of the narrative interpretation of stuff, let's see what happens in the very next panel. Keeping in mind that we've already established that Hashirama can like refer to himself in the first person through his clones while still talking about himself. So the fact that the clone himself is saying like stronger than me could still be referring back to Hashirama himself, like his main body. Tobirama then says, no offense, but it appears so. Even if you absorb your remaining doppelgangers, you're no match, elder brother. So he's talking to the clone, and he calls the clone elder brother. And he says, even if you reabsorb your remaining doppelgangers, you're no match. So he's not saying, hey, you, clone of Hashirama, who's like a few minutes old, you are my literal brother. I am very, very stupid, and I think that you are my brother. You, clone, need to now go around absorbing the other versions of yourself, and even if you do that, though, you won't be strong enough to defeat Madara. He's talking about Hashirama, his actual brother, through the clone. He does not regard, like, he's essentially treating the clone as synonymous with Hashirama himself. He's not saying that the clone doesn't scale to Jubito. He's not saying that if the clone disappears or remerges or whatever, that the clone won't be able to clash with him. He's saying that Hashirama himself can't deal with it, which is part of the overall narrative emphasis and weight of this whole thing. Which is why I don't think this I think this argument that like he's it's just the clone, so it does like the feat doesn't apply is just total horseshit. Like it doesn't fit at all. I think I will pause to read chat. There's a few more things to go over, but we're kind of getting towards the end. But actually, let me skip ahead and then we'll kind of come back here, because on the topic of like the clones referring to themselves versus their owner, I also want to go to chapter 649, then we'll go back for a minute. But this is when Hashirama is trying to like psych up the whole Shinobi Alliance to start attacking Jubito. And basically he's accepting response. Was it 639? Hang on a second. 640. I thought it was 649. If I can find this, he has a statement where he says something along the lines of like, "This is." Yeah, okay, I just scrolled past it, right? So Tsunade comes up to him and says, "Forgive me, grandfather." This is Hashirama's clone. The real Hashirama himself is fighting Madara, his real body. Tsunade addresses the clone not as "forgive me, grandfather's clone." She addresses the clone as the grandfather himself. Then Hashirama himself says, "It is I who've dragged this mess into my grandchildren's era. I am the true loser here." So again, he's not saying, "I, the clone who was just created a few minutes ago, it's my fault." He also doesn't say, "It's the fault of my real body. You gotta go talk to him," right? He's saying, he treats the clone itself is just a voice box for Hashirama. It is Hashirama who is talking. He's talking through the clone, but it is Hashirama himself. So if we then go back here, again, the idea that like this doesn't count because it's just the clone talking. When the clones talk and they refer to themselves in the first person, they're talking about Hashirama himself. So that being said, before I go over a couple more things, let me check up on chat real quick. Worm says, "I think we went over that stuff." The X. Minato's even waker. Yeah, talked about that. Oh, hey, Howard, how's it going? Good to see you. Hope you are doing well. Howard says, "Hello, everyone. Hi, John. I hope everyone's well." Yeah, I think it's been kind of a busy week, but I am doing okay and always having fun talking to you guys. So it's I always look forward to this at the end of the week. So that's nice. Apologies for my absence and lateness. Yeah, no worries at all. Like, it's always great to see you. But as I said to Saria before, like nobody is under any obligation. Always happy when you guys stop by, but also I understand like things come up in life and like stuff happens and life is life. Like one of my favorite streamers that I go to see regularly for the past month or so, I've just basically been dropping in and saying, "Hi, can't stay, goodbye," right? And it's not because I think any less of the streamer. It's just like when he streams, it tends to be like midnight for me, and I'm just like, I can't right now, right? So it's it's totally understandable. It's just good to see you, and I hope you're doing well. Howard says, "A Hashirama clone is likely talking in the moment. It's also unknown if the real Hashirama can assess all the knowledge a new clones gather as new information in the moment a clone gets it." I think that I'm not sure if the individual clones immediately relay back to Hashirama, main body. I think the opposite is true though. Anything that Hashirama learns, the clones will also learn about immediately, but I will need to try to see if I can find the actual statement. So let me see. 639. One second. So 641. There actually aren't that many more statements to go over, so this should be pretty quick. Although before next stream, I do want to go back and review Madara's fight with the Gokage, right? So going to 641 over here, let's see. So I think it's significant that obviously Hashirama wants to get his main body over to Jubito to help out with that fight. Madara says absolutely not, and gets in his way. So at this point, it might be the case that Hashirama is overall 1% stronger than Madara and is still the strongest shinobi. But that being said, he doesn't seem like, if he is actually stronger than Madara, it seems to be to me like a negligible amount, because he's not able to like blitz and get around him. He's not able to blitz and one-shot him. He's not able to just eliminate him from the battlefield or even just circumvent him, right? Madara gets in his way, and Hashirama respects his power and has to deal with him before he gets to Jubito. So Madara is still a significant threat to Hashirama, to the point where he is an obstruction that he needs to overcome. Now, that's not necessarily any kind of like super hardcore debunk saying that like, okay, Hashirama is therefore equal necessarily, but they spar with one another, they clash with one another in a way that Hashirama is not able to like immediately resolve or just negate or whatever. So I do think that could be used as part of an overall like collection of data to suggest their relativity, if that makes sense. Um, 642. So the next one is 643. So Naruto has just figured out the sort of sage mode hack, so to speak, to be able to damage Jubito. Um, yeah. So again, like Hashirama is very urgently trying to get to Jubito. Madara says, "Fuck no, keep fighting." And again, like he manages to corner and pressure Hashirama, or like not corner him, but like to keep him focused and keep his attention focused on Madara himself, to the extent that like Hashirama is not able to just get away, right? Like he's respecting his power. Um, he also then says, "Do not give up all. I am with you. We only need to change the sphere's trajectories." Okay, like again, I think he's referring to himself as a character overall, but that one's a little bit more open for debate. Let's see. I want to specifically see where Hashirama says this thing about Naruto's power. I guess it wasn't here. I thought it was. Hashirama has some statement somewhere. I guess I'm missing it about like Naruto almost having as much chakra as he does, but it might be in the next chapter. Let's just see real quick. Is it this thing? Come on, where is it? Oh yeah, okay. So here we have chapter 644. Hashirama says, "I can't believe he shared his chakra with every other shinobi. He's got almost as much chakra as I. No, and then we have this internal monologue. No, actually, this has Nine Tails chakra mixed in." So again, like I guess if you were squirming around, you could look at this and be like, well, this is actually Hashirama's clone talking. So the clone is saying that Naruto almost has as much chakra as the clone. So Hashirama's main body must have even more chakra than Naruto in this form. But again, like if you are the author of a work like this and you are trying to convey just how powerful Naruto is, what makes more sense? Like what is the best way to convey that? By saying that Naruto almost has as much chakra as this clone that we do not know how strong the clone is. We don't know how much chakra, like what percentage of chakra, what overall combat strength that clone has with respect to Hashirama. Or does it make more sense for Hashirama himself, including like part of his internal monologue, to be acknowledging that Naruto is almost as strong as he is, right? I think the second one is much more reasonable. And then when you account for the fact that then Naruto and Sasuke very soon after like both go at Jubito at the same time with like a sage enhanced Susanoo, a sage enhanced KCM2 Kurama avatar, whatever, and then all of the Shinobi Alliance with them, and they clash evenly with Jubito, and then eventually like Naruto still has to like talk no jutsu him down to be able to finally pull the chakra out of him. I think all of that put together, it's like, okay, if Hashirama himself is saying that Naruto alone almost has as much chakra as he does, what does that mean for the implications of Obito when Obito scales to Naruto and Kurama plus everybody else, including like Sage, Susanoo, fucking Sasuke, right? Uh, from a storytelling standpoint, does it make more sense that it's the clone saying that about some arbitrarily scaled down unknown power level clone, or does it make more sense that it's Hashirama himself saying that for dramatic weight or whatever? Let's see. So yeah, 645. I think I already kind of let on what I was talking about there. This is just when they clash and how much power they bring with them. There's nothing specific about Hashirama there. So it is. I do think this is interesting to note. It seems like in chapter 647, this is when Madara is like so Jubito has summoned the god tree and it started to fork out and start draining people's chakra. And specifically, we get this interesting clash between Hashirama and Madara. And this is where Madara says there's 15 minutes left to go. But you'll notice that Hashirama no longer has Sage power or Sage mode active with the markings, and Madara himself also is no longer in the Susanoo. If you go back, I think I missed it, but like there's this moment over here that I hadn't noticed before where Madara has a Susanoo and Hashirama has Sage Mode, like, quote unquote, turned off, but then you see that, like, it looks like Madara's Susanoo chakra is actually sucked up into the God Tree. So I think what's happening here is the God Tree is draining both of their chakra, and in Hashirama's case, it results in him losing Sage Mode, like the natural energy is just going into the tree, and in Madara's case, it results in him losing the Susanoo. But then going back to the clones, like whether the clones are talking about themselves or whatnot, Hashirama starts talking to the allied shinobi forces through Ino, and it's technically the clone talking, but then, like, Tsunade acknowledges him by saying grandfather. These characters are also, like, talking to him as though he is Hashirama himself. None of them says, like, oh cool, it's Hashirama's clone who's talking to us, right? It's they regard the clone as synonymous with Hashirama for the purposes of the conversation. Hashirama himself is talking to them through the clone, I think, is the best interpretation of that. And there was one more thing I wanted to see if I could find. Yeah, I think there's one more thing, but I'm not finding it at the moment, so I'll just scan through this real quick. Maybe not all the way to the bottom and see if I can find anything, but then otherwise I think I'll turn to chat and then we can wrap things up for tonight, and then tomorrow, or sorry, next Sunday we'll go and respond to Sage's video. But yeah, this is what I was talking about before, right? It's like Naruto in Sage KCM and Sasuke with Jugo's like Sage Perfect Susanoo. You know, they're both attacking simultaneously. The memories of Hashirama come through the and get broadcast to the Shinobi Alliance via the telepathy. There was something somewhere Hashirama says something about, like, I am a clone, I need to tell people what my main body just heard. I don't know where the hell that is. I'll see if I can find that for next time. Maybe somebody knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, like, Hashirama and Madara are both drained here. They're still kind of clashing evenly, as far as I can tell. But also, Madara manages to... It's really hard to tell when this happens, but, like, just in case anybody's confused about this, at this point, we see Madara and Hashirama clashing. Madara has his Rinnegan rod active, and it looks like Hashirama dodges out of the way, but you can see, like, his expression, he's pretty grim. He's pretty, like, stressed out about everything. And I think... like, this is his clone, obviously. The next time we see Hashirama, he's got a bunch of chakra rods in his back. And I at least am not exactly clear when they get inserted, but at the very least, it's implied that in this particular clash between these two characters in these forms, Madara manages to do well enough against Hashirama to be able to implant these rods in his back. And then he's able to take advantage of that fact once he gets access to, like, once he's resurrected, to paralyze him and hold him in place. I don't think I have anything else to say right now. I just wanted to see if I could get us there. It goes through this whole fight with Obito, so it takes a second to get there. I'll try to keep my eyes out to see if there's any more clashing between Hashirama and Madara, but I don't think so. I think it's basically like Obito clock at this point. Yeah. There's the tree. You just find that one statement, make me happy, but I don't think I'll be able to. Right, yeah, and this is the internal monologue, so I don't think we see anything from Hashirama or Madara here. Fine. Maybe I'll find that relay statement if I can. Actually, yeah, let me maybe move that up a little bit. No, can't find it. Almost there. We're almost done. Okay, so wins the tug of war, pulls it out. Sasuke dashes forward. They clash over who's going to get a chance to kill him. Yeah, actually, I think it's important to go over this. There's a couple of more things about Madara and Hashirama. We don't really know what specifically happened with Madara and Hashirama. At some point over the course of their clash, right? Like, Madara somehow gets wound up in this dragon, right? So Hashirama is panting, despite the fact that he's an Edo Tensei. He's still tired. Madara has managed to get multiple Rinnegan rods in his body, but Hashirama manages to coil him up in this dragon, so it looks like they are both having like this back and forth sort of thing. Um, Hashirama moves away from the incoming attack from Naruto. He also believes that he has disabled Madara's ability to absorb ninjutsu, so this attack should harm him. Um, and then we don't really see what happens immediately thereafter, but what we do see is that like Madara himself is suppressed with the deity gates, but I guess like either Hashirama's like wood dragon or whatever dissipated, or he took it off when Naruto's ability got there, or maybe Madara broke out of it. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but basically what we're left with now is a Hashirama who had restrained Madara, got assistance with a big ass fucking Rasen Shuriken from Naruto, um, and although that didn't take him down, it looks like Madara's dead to rights. It looks like Madara is suppressed. Edo Hashirama, despite being Edo, is still like huffing and panting, and he's waiting for. He thinks that he has Madara suppressed, but Madara does this little smirk, right? And then coming up in a moment when the Rinne Rebirth starts, obviously Zetsu shows up, and Madara says, "Time to switch places," and then he says, "I'll be going on the attack now." Hashirama says, "Quit the tough guy act, the war's over," and Madara is like not bothered at all. Like he's just kind of chilling, right? So he gets the resurrection. Immediately when he gets resurrected, he just blasts through the gates and destroys them. So even if you think he was literally restrained here and Hashirama had basically won here and there was no way for him to get out of him, at the moment he gets resurrected, he immediately negates that and he's just like done, right? So I think that there's a very strong case to be made for Madara and like Edo Madara and Edo Hashirama being relative to each other on and off throughout the fight. Then Madara manages to like get resurrected. He gets stronger. This is reinforced multiple times by characters saying like we can't let him resurrect himself. Madara is like going back to his former strength, etc. And then he also shrugs off these gates, and then after that he becomes a Ten Tails Jinchuriki. After that, he gets like each of his eyes back, and he becomes a Ten Tails Jinchuriki. Gets access to Limbo, and all the other like Rinnegan Jutsu with his real, actual, non-fake Edo Tensei Rinnegan. At that point, and he gets the Sage Mode buff, right? So like, Madara has his vitality restored. He gets the Sage Mode buff and is actually able to use Sage Mode from Hashirama. He gets 2 real Rinnegan, and then he becomes the Jubi Jinchuriki. At that point, there is no argument whatsoever for the idea that Hashirama is still the strongest. Like, it just doesn't work. When you put all of that shit together and you look throughout the entirety of the fight, there is no way that Hashirama is still stronger than, like, Jubidara. That doesn't check out at all. And I know what people might say, the fucking databook says so. Well, then the databook is wrong. Right? The databook is one piece of evidence. We compare that one piece of evidence in the databook to all of this evidence from the series, from the primary source, from the manga itself, and we find that there are more individual pieces of evidence from the manga that accumulate together to paint a picture that is more thorough and more detailed than one fucking out-of-context statement from the manga. Put that all from the databooks, and then we can say, okay, the databook is a piece of evidence. It represents a piece of evidence, but it is not definitive, and it doesn't hold authority such that it negates everything else. So, with that being said, I want to check on chat before I leave for the night, but my goal for tonight was basically to go over the major feats, the major points, the major knowledge base for these fights, and just try to understand Madara like as a character and as a fighter, and how he develops as a fighter throughout these clashes. Talk about some of the overall arguments for and against him being relative to Hashirama, and then next time we can address Sage's video on the subject. I'll make sure to finish listening to the walkie-talkie debate for a second time, and I'll go back and I'll read the the Madara versus the Gokage fight again in case I missed anything there, and we can talk more about other databook statements like the one about Madara, Jubidara, getting hit by Sekizo or like Night Guy's flow or whatever. Yeah, I think that's it. So let's see. How about No says they don't learn immediately as with the Rasen Shuriken training. Naruto gets it all once they pop. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure if the wood clones work exactly the same way, but you're definitely right about the shadow clones. Um, Howard says, consider this, Edo Hashirama as a threat is weaker than his alive self in physicality and access to his overall jutsu usage, but retains his mastery of a sage mode and is straight equal to Edo Madara. That's possible. I don't want to take a hardline stance on like the concept of Edo nerfs. I think that within a debate context, if somebody wants to make the positive claim that Edo Tensei are nerfed, I would probably press them a little bit to say, can you elaborate on that and show me exactly what you mean? Because I think it's open to interpretation. But between you and me, I don't feel the need to like push back too hard on that, if that makes sense. And I think you can support that argument by looking at Tobirama's statement when the Edo Tensei are brought back, the Edo Hokage are brought back. Awart says, mind you, Madara wasn't equal to Hashirama in the Final Valley, as the databooks state that even Hashirama's Wood Golem was equal to Madara's Kurama. Madara needing Kurama to fight Hashirama. Side note, the flashbacks of Madara versus Hashirama from both Madara's and Obito's POV to the scene of Madara's roaring at Hashi, which was never seen in Hashi's take. Oh, do you, flashbacks of Madara versus Hashirama from Madara and Obito's POV, do you remember where that is? I think I might be getting confused. I'd like to take another look at that to make sure I didn't miss anything. Zelda nerd shit. Yeah, that's totally fine. Sorry, don't worry about it. Yeah, so I'll elaborate this. I will elaborate on this a bit more in next week's stream, but I will say that something that I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the stream is that when Madara summons Kurama, he does so with his own jutsu, the Kuchiyose summoning. Like, it's not like Kurama himself waltzes over to the battlefield and says, hey buddy, I got your back, let's fight together. He has to use the summoning jutsu, his own jutsu involving his own chakra expenditure, to summon massive chakra lump Kurama all the way to his location. Then he has to use his Sharingan Genjutsu to put Kurama under his control. So the way that I look, and then like to maintain that over the course of the fight, the way that I look at Kurama's relationship to Madara at that point is that Kurama is Madara's weapon. In the same way that that Akamaru is Kiba's like ninja tool, and in the Chunin exams, it's stated that in the same way that like Shino can use his bugs and other characters can use kunai and stuff like that, the way that Kiba fights is with Akamaru. It's a little bit different because Akamaru is actually fighting alongside him as a companion, as a friend. But Madara is basically choosing to invest his chakra in a skill. That skill is called Summons Kurama, and uses him as part of his arsenal under his control. That takes a certain amount of his energy. That takes a certain amount of his focus. Now, that being said, a character like a Jedi with a lightsaber is probably more powerful than that same Jedi without the lightsaber, right? Depending on the nature of the fight or who they're fighting against. Like, or just to use like regular human combatants, like if you have two people and they're martial artists and they're basically relative to another, and then you give one of them a sword, the other one is going to be at a disadvantage. But let's say you have two equal human combatants, like they're basically equal. So one of them says, you know what, I think I'm going to, put on like a suit of armor that's like a Fallout power armor type thing, right? Like it's this big bulky thing, but it's super powerful, and I can like punch harder and have more durability and all this stuff. And so he gets in the suit of power armor, and then his opponent throws an EMP grenade at him and shorts out all the systems and like destroys the power armor. So the first guy has to jump out of it, and now they're back to fighting like one-on-one before. I think it would be kind of missing the point to say that the first guy in the power armor needed the power armor to beat the other guy. I also think it would be kind of missing the point to say that the second guy like was stronger than the power armor, because yes, the power armor was a weapon that was chosen to use in that fight, and it did have the possibility of granting the first fighter an advantage over the second fighter, but it wasn't a sure thing, and it came with its own like drawbacks, and it required its own like control and power supply and stuff like that. The second character was then able to negate it with something that directly countered it without necessarily like punching through the metal of it. Like he didn't have to like wrestle it. He didn't have to. I mean, like it's a little different because um, Hashirama does like grasp Kurama, right? He does physically restrain it, but he doesn't like punch through Kurama's chest and rip his heart out or something like that, right? He doesn't actually kill Kurama or anything like that. He puts him to sleep. To me, that's analogous to throwing in an EMP. If you can disable the suit of armor without punching through it, that disabling action is not equivalent in AP or DC to punching through it, right? So I think there's some nuance there. Yeah, Madara thought he was getting an advantage by bringing the weapon. The weapon didn't work because it got countered, but now they're like, he doesn't just like run away, right? He keeps on fighting, and is able to pressure Hashirama to the point of, um, wounding him and stripping off some of his armor and stuff like that. I will say I think Madara's durability. Well, no, I don't want to get into that. Talk about his durability next time. I do want to check one thing real quick. Yeah, so Madara's entry in the fourth data book does have this line: Madara and Hashirama are equal in strength. A paper-thin difference decided victory or defeat. Right? So, in case you think I just made that up, like, or I just written that of my own accord or got something wrong, this should be in the character files. So let's just take a look. Uchiha Madara, right? Like, so let's see. Special characteristics: Kege Genkai summoning, right? So he summons Kurama. This is actually kind of cute. Madara prefers moonlight to sunlight. While viewing the moon as it was suspended in the darkness, he thought about his own ideals. But yeah, let's look at paper. Right. So let's just read from the start of this, right? Madara's hatred was split between two entities: Hashirama because of his incompatible dreams, and also towards the village of Konoha. He then unfolded incidents upon Hashirama by attacking the village on multiple occasions. In a battle to the death, and with Madara's defeat, the curtain closed on that era. However, that was the rise of the curtain for a great dream. Madara escaped death, cutting apart the fate of love and hatred. He aspired to a world even without winners or losers. As for Madara, reality was certainly hell. At the end of his lifespan of sorrow and anguish, and at the moment where his life was about to collapse, Madara finally awakened the Rinnegan. It was dwelling in Madara's pair of eyes, the power to change his dream into an ideal reality. They are equal in strength. Madara remained unchanged, but Hashirama changed for the sake of the village. A paper-thin difference between the two of them decided victory or defeat. So, the paper-thin difference, you could argue that Hashirama was like a teeny tiny bit stronger, but it does say they are equal in strength, and it is possible for, like, David and Goliath style, right? Somebody can be overall physically a lot weaker than an opponent, but can still defeat that stronger opponent. The fact that Hashirama did win doesn't mean that he's necessarily overall stronger. So, and especially since he used that feint and deceptive technique, I think it's fair to look at all this and be like, okay, the data book does literally say that Hashirama and Madara are equal in strength, and it was just this tiny difference that decided the end of the fight. If we're gonna just be taking data book statements literally anyway, this to me is a strong enough piece of counter evidence to at least call the Hashirama being the strongest thing into question, because we have a direct contradictory statement that has the same amount of argumentative weight that is like mutually exclusive to the Hashirama statement. So at the very least, the argument can't proceed unless one is demonstrated to be like stronger than the other, if that makes sense. Okay. So, Kabuto's talk with Madara. Yeah, I need to go over that whole thing because there's probably stuff I'm missing there. How about No says Madara also tries summoning Kurama as an Edo and it's only Naruto seal that stops him? Yeah, I think I mentioned that before. Like, it's part of why Kurama decides to collaborate with Naruto because he's like, I'm not fucking dealing with with that fucking Uchiha asshole again. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I know that we didn't get to the video itself, but don't worry, I'll have plenty to say next week. I hope this time frame worked for people. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will wrap things up for tonight. But I appreciate all you stopping by and participating in the conversation. I will look forward to picking this up next week. And in the meantime, just